I'd like to call the meeting to order at 7:02, I think. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. Okay, and first on the agenda is citizens' comments, and we're going to start with any citizens who are on Zoom who would like to make a comment. And if you are wanting to, you can raise your hand, and we will get you up there. As always, we ask you to keep your comments to just about 3 minutes, and I've asked Julia, who's to my left, to keep the time, and she'll raise a hand to let you know when you're getting to that 3-minute point. As always, remember that the citizens' comments are a really excellent way for you to let us know how you're thinking, and we appreciate all input and all comments. And it's a business meeting, and so the comments won't be addressed directly. It's not, things that aren't on the agenda and comments aren't going to be addressed directly. But please know that all input and all comments are appreciated, whether they're here in citizens' comments or whether they're via email. We appreciate it. All right, Mary Beth, do we have anybody with their hand raised?
At this point, I do not see any hands raised. So we'll give it just a minute and see.
Let's give it a moment, and maybe I'll ask if we have any. Does anyone from the audience here, would you like to make a comment?
Please raise your hand.
Dana, do you just want to mention that the meeting's being recorded? Yeah, okay.
While we're waiting, just a reminder to all that the meeting is being recorded and also live streamed on HWCam. What was that? And on YouTube via HWCam. Okay. Tom, Mary Beth, anyone?
No.
Okay. All right. So at this point, we will close down the Zoom, but those of you who are watching on Zoom, you can switch over and watch, like I just mentioned, at YouTube, HWCam on YouTube. You can watch the live stream. Okay, so first order of business is a vote to approve an additional counselor for the 21-22 school year. And what I'd like to do is, I think we'll start by having Mary Beth explain what we're looking for here.
Okay, great. And one of the things I have been able to do is just upload a brief memo to the committee to outline what I'm going to say to you this evening. But if you recall, at our last meeting, we talked a little bit about what our plans were for the ESSER grant. And right before that meeting and those plans had occurred, at DESE, we received notification that they are anticipating picking up any costs related to pool testing or other types of testing that might be necessary this fall. And so that freed up some money in our ESSER grant, and we also had $10,000 earmarked for mental health that we had not yet determined the best way to utilize that funds. After that school committee meeting, which occurred on Wednesday evening, we had a leadership team meeting on Thursday morning, the day after school got out, and we discussed how we could best use those funds to support our students in the fall. I also heard from a number of you that you hear about and are concerned about student mental health issues, so that was something else that was considered. And after looking at all of that, the leadership team landed on the best use of the ESSER funds would be to hire an additional counselor at the Winthrop Elementary School for next year. I do want to indicate that this would be the position's home base. But what it also does is give capacity within our Department of Counseling and Guidance, so that if we have other needs across any of our schools, we have some wiggle room to provide additional support. The reason that we believe it makes sense to have Winthrop to be the home base of this position is that Winthrop has proportionally more students on IEPs than the other elementary schools because of the programs that it houses. And because of that, you tend to see more what would be referred to as grid services that are provided to students. And some of the students, because some of our most intensive programs are there, can find themselves in crisis that require a counselor's support. And what that means is that this school, that leaves less time for that proactive kind of work with students and families. So the leadership team is recommending, and we would like to best use those funds to put in a counselor for the 21-22 school year at Winthrop, again, to provide the whole district with some extra capacity and to target that at that elementary school, given the needs that we anticipate will be there. And the policy that is voted upon by the school committee is that you must vote if we are going to add a new position. So I am respectfully coming in front of you and asking you to support this position for the 21-22 school year. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. So what I'd like to do, if before we have a motion, what I'd like to do is, very specifically, if anyone has a clarifying question, I'd like to just do that first, and then we can have a motion and any discussion or debate. But first, anyone that just has a clarifying question. Anna?
Hi, thank you. Thank you for that. I think it's just a minor thing, but I just want to be clear. The memo talks about fiscal year 23 and references 22-23, but you're talking about next year only, correct?
You are right. That is a typo, and I apologize for that. It should be the 21-22 school year.
So just for the 1 year, not continuing after that.
Yeah, I think like all things, we would assess that and look at budget, but we know that we have funding through the ESSER 2 to provide this service for the 21-22 school year, and it would be targeted, and that fits with the mission of that grant, which is to support students as they come out of the COVID environment.
Okay, thank you.
Covered my question.
Great. And I greatly appreciate team members who, when their question is answered, that's great. Let me ask each other's questions. That's great. Does anyone else have a clarifying question? Michelle?
So will the counselor be on the teacher grid?
Yeah.
And do we anticipate like a M5, or what are we anticipating for costs?
Yeah, so the counselor positions, as other counselors are in our district, would fall in the teacher grid, and that we are currently budgeting around a master's +5 for that, so we would be looking to bring someone in around that area.
Anyone else? Michelle, I can't quite see you. Nope.
Thank you.
Okay. Jennifer, do you feel like you have enough information to make a motion? Okay, go ahead.
I move that we approve an additional counselor at Winthrop School for the 2021-2022 school year.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Anna. And is there discussion?
What will the sort of hiring process be for this? Will there be community involvement? Who's going to be involved in that?
Typically, what would happen at this time of year is that I would anticipate that Kristen Lazaro, who is the Director of Counseling, would be involved in that, along with the principal of Winthrop Elementary School. We would attempt to get some teachers in and some parents during the summer. That process in recruiting those members of the hiring committee can sometimes be difficult, but that would be the plan, and we will have to see who's actually available to form the group.
Michelle Horgan?
You did say that although the council will be housed at Winthrop, the council potentially could be available across elementary and secondary?
Yeah, and that the counseling department is really tight-knit. They do a great job of when there is a challenge or needs that are arising in other buildings that need additional support. That already happens, but this will give us another body who will have a little bit more flexibility to do that.
Thank you.
Other discussion? Okay. Are we ready for a vote? Okay. So the motion is to approve a one-year counselor position for the 2021-2022 school year at Winthrop School. All right, all those in favor? And it is unanimous, and the motion passes. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Right. I think at this point, Mary Beth is actually going to depart, and we are going to begin our conversation and discussion about the superintendent transition process that we're going to create this evening. Thank you, Mary Beth.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to try to frame the conversation this evening. So our task tonight is to create an agreement on the next steps for moving forward with the transition and the superintendent in the fall, October 1st, beginning October 1st. We'll know that we achieved our goal this evening if it is clear to all of us what the process is going to be and what our next steps are going to be. We're going to focus this evening, I'm going to try to really focus us on the position and what the committee identifies as the key components of the role and the position that we're looking for. So I'm going to start. I think it makes sense to start, well, I guess I'll say that my sense is that given the timing, we are going to be hiring an interim, but I want to make sure that we have consensus on that before we get started on the conversation. Okay.
I just need more clarification on what exactly that means.
Absolutely. So an interim is a person who is, rather than, we wouldn't be offering them a typical 3-year contract. They would be getting a contract for the year. And that interim is, what we're going to discuss is that interim position can look a lot of different ways. It's also, and those of you who have been on the committee longer can speak a little bit to this if Julia needs that. It's the interim hiring process is less intense.
Expedited?
Is expedited. Thank you, Dorothy. Does that make sense?
So how long does the typical interim hiring process go versus the typical full-time?
This is an excellent question.
Am I jumping
No,
ahead?
no, you aren't. And it makes me realize that I sort of launched in before I sort of said that Dorothy is here. I know that the whole committee knows that Dorothy Presser is here with us. And this is exactly the sort of thing that Dorothy is going to be here, that when there are really specific questions like that, that we might rely on her and her knowledge about exactly. So that's a great demonstration of something that Dorothy might be able to answer, how expedited or how it differs. So thank you.
So generally, in the process of hiring an interim, you would put out, you would advertise for less time. So you would probably put out your advertisement or your RFP for like about 3 weeks, and you're not going to have as many people apply for it as you would have apply for a permanent position. If you're doing a search for a permanent position, in general, if you're doing the entire process where you're getting community input and then having a screening committee that brings finalists to the school committee, and doing those interviews and site visits, 3 to 4 months would be the amount of time that you would want to allow for that process to play out. The other, maybe I should just stop and say I answered the question and let other questions fly.
Yeah, I think we're
before
going to
get-
have, yeah, thank you, and that was very helpful. Do you have other questions? Does that answer your question? Did you feel like?
So it's 3 weeks typically from announcing the interim position, the RFP, until hiring someone.
Until you that would be like the application period, like you put it out and say the deadline for applications
Oh,
is 3 weeks
okay.
from now.
Okay.
And then you would have the applications, generally with an interim, then you go, they're all interviewed just in public by the school committee. There's no screening committee that takes place ahead of time.
Okay.
But the school committee would look at the resumes, decide who they want to, or the application packages, decide who they would like to bring in for the interviews, do the public interviews, and make a decision in relatively short order, a couple, maybe 3 weeks after that application deadline, as
Okay.
opposed to the the month or 6 week or 8 week process that can happen after the application deadline in a full search.
Okay. I assume that's typical, doing the interim process versus the permanent process. The interim process is usually first?
Well, in this situation, for example, if you had a vacancy that you knew about, if the superintendent said a year from now I'm going to retire, you wouldn't get an interim. You'd have the time you needed to go straight into a search for a permanent superintendent.
Okay.
So part of what the rationale here is the expedited timeline and the time of the year that it is. That it would be hard to, A, do the whole process, and B, find someone who is able to start without other contractual obligations for this coming up school year.
That makes
Many
sense.
super-
It's
That makes
important
sense.
to note,
Okay.
sorry,
Yeah.
that, two things. Well, that is a traditional route. It's also within the power of this board to say, okay, you know what, we can name Vinnie Leone and vote on it here tonight without actually going through that process to name an interim. Excuse me. The other thing that should note is a little historical context. When we went through the last interim phase, we went through the first series of interviews and didn't find a candidate that we liked and actually went back
Correct.
for more. So it was an extended process.
Correct. Thank you. Okay, so and I'd like to sort of do this in a sort of step-by-step manner, and that was actually helpful. So that was a good example of a question about the first topic, which is just getting consensus on that we're really going to be looking for an interim. So just now that we answered those questions, do people still feel comfortable that that's what we're going to be talking about, interim? Okay. Okay. So what I'd like to do at this point, and I maybe it's just me, but I will tell you that if you guys aren't talking right into your microphone, I have a hard time hearing. Okay. So what I'd like to do in this conversation is to get clarity on what the committee wants the position to look like. What are we looking for in an interim superintendent? And there are a couple of ways we can go about this. I have a beautiful little decision tree, but we can go about it in a couple of ways, and I want to really respect the wisdom of the committee. So one of the things to think about, or I'll just put them both on, one of the things is to think about what would we like this person to be doing? Like, what is the role that we want to define? As we get into that, one of the things that I think is going to become evident is that one of the things we need to think about is, do we want an interim who is eligible to apply for the permanent position, or do we want an interim who is not eligible to apply And another way to put that would be, is the person auditioning for the role of permanent superintendent, or are they very specifically an interim with the understanding that that is their role? So those are kind of two things, but they're very related. Like, what do we want in the role and whether or not we want them to be applied. So I guess, I may just want to hear brief thoughts from everyone, if you guys are willing to do that, if people are willing to give everybody at least one chance to give a brief thought. And I trust us all to judge what's brief, and if people are willing, maybe go around and just do that. Okay? I don't know.
I'd love people with more knowledge, more history,
All right.
just to go before me,
Okay.
so I can hear maybe
All right,
pros
who's
and
ready
pros
to
and
go?
cons.
Who's ready to
of
go?
both of
Let me know who's ready to start. Who's ready to go?
I can jump in.
Okay, all right. Why don't we go Michelle and then David?
I guess when we hired Julie as our interim, we needed someone that would steady the ship. I think coming off of COVID and every other obstacle and hurdle we had to overcome, we need that type of person that's going to steady the ship. We also need someone that has historical knowledge and someone that will stay on for after the interim year. But we need to make sure if that person wants to stay on, that we give that person an opportunity to thrive and not to fail. We have a history, and I'm not just talking about this board, but of past boards too, of not giving superintendents the best shake. And I think we need to stop that. So I think this person that we look at and bring in, if they do want to continue on after this first year, we need to set them up for success and not for failure. So,
Thank you. And I think, let's hear from everyone, and then maybe, because I know I took some notes on what you said, and I have questions, but let's hear from everyone. David?
So I'm wondering how much, and maybe this isn't the time to bring it up, maybe it's a little bit later in the discussion, but just sort of the history of how we got here. But, when we went through this last process, it was really looking like there was an internal candidate here that was going to get, and then they withdrew their name at the last minute, excuse me, which kind of changed sort of the whole sort of vision of what we were looking for. It has been about 2.5 years since, we've had a long-term superintendent here. So in that time, we've really been sort of treading water, right, and not really been able to move forward. So the idea of, bringing someone in off the street means they're really going to come in here and make sure nothing blows up, as much, and they're not going to do as much to sort of help push any agenda or that we have in place forward. A little, I think we lucked out as a district when we did get Julie. And in fact, she wasn't in our original thoughts because we're like, well, this isn't an interim, this is a long-term sub. We would just get disappointed by her anyway. And then when we went, not disappointed, but like heartbroken that she was going to end up coming, so we were going to love it and then go someplace else. But then when she happened to still be available, she came in and she wasn't one of those just sit idly by and make sure all the bills are paid, and then Melrose sort of stole her out from under us, and so as we're looking, for that, and I know that, those of us that worked with Julia were like, well, you know what, there's these great interims out there, they are few and far between. I do think we found a needle in a haystack. I'm not saying that there aren't great interims out there. It's just whether, what we're looking for district-wide. And I think at this point, I think we all want to sort of be moving forward. So, in thinking that, that it's like, who are we going to get in off the street, right? Usually these interims are, retired superintendents, a pretty generic demographic, And they come in and, they're very good at their jobs and, they sort of, but they're not going to make any progressive movements for our district. They'll come in and help Vinnie out in the office and, keep everything afloat and, again, keep everything from sort of catching on fire.
Thank you. Okay. Jen, are you ready, or you want to wait?
All things, if I had two applicants here and they were both equally qualified, but one had history in the district, I'm going to pick the person with history in the district, just because anytime you start a new academic job, you're looking at 6 months before you're up and running and understand the system, and that's just for a professorship. I can't imagine what it would be like for a superintendent. I don't want to make anybody ineligible for applying, because if we get somebody brilliant, I don't want to say, well, we said at the beginning of this process that we weren't going to let you apply for the full-time gig. If we get somebody in the position who's truly brilliant, I'm going to keep them.
Okay, thank you. Michelle Bailey?
So we had a longtime superintendent who was pretty much the superintendent when my children started here, and even before that. And when she left, there was a time period of instability with a superintendent coming in, being here for a short period of time, an internal person being made the interim, and it was a complete disaster. That person didn't have the experience of being a superintendent, and they were coming into a role that they weren't quite ready for, and that put the ship afloat for a while until Dr. Harvey got here. So if it's an internal person, it's got to be the, I don't know if there is an internal person. I really feel like we need someone who, we've gone through a difficult year. I think we need someone to come in and clear the air, so that when you have a permanent superintendent, there isn't any of the bad, leftover rotten stuff in the refrigerator for them to clean out. It would be better if that was done before they got here. I feel like Marblehead had all of that turmoil with their finances when they went to the interim, and they seem to have, and they got the interim that we didn't get that had experience, and they seem to have weathered that fairly well and moved along. So I feel like that's going to be our best plan, is to go with experience, someone who can come in and make a path so that when we have a permanent superintendent, that is that the place is ready to take someone. The issue with what Jen had talked about is if we get someone in as an interim who is great, that they would stay on, is in the beginning, if we're looking for a candidate who has experience, then that's the type of thing we want to advertise, that's what we're looking for. And then you're not going to get candidates who are interested in being the superintendent applying. And that's how we got Julie Kuchenberger's last time, is because first we interviewed only people who were not going to apply. And then when our 3 candidates ended up not working out, then we went to a second round. If you're going to mix those two up, then when it comes to the decision-making process, it's going to be super confusing. So to me, we need to sort of decide that first. And I would really recommend that we not hire someone who we think, for the interim, who we think might be the permanent superintendent. Because I feel like what the superintendent needs to do this next year is not going to allow them to build the relationships that they're going to need to be the successful superintendent long term. So I would encourage us to look for someone who has experience to come through for the year and sort of, like I said, clean out the refrigerator.
Thank you. Julia?
That's interesting. So all I could think of when you were talking was Mary Poppins.
Oh, yeah, really?
How she came in and completely
Right.
whipped the kids into shape and then she left. That's really interesting.
Maybe we
So-
should put that in the ad.
Yes.
Umbrella
We need
and
Mary
carpet
Poppins.
bag.
Because, no, if you think about it, she really
She did.
told the family what they needed to hear, but she never planned on staying permanently, so she wasn't trying to make friends. So I know she's fictional.
And we're the kids, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's interesting to me. So now I need to think more, because I'm really siding more with the auditioning for the permanent role. But I see what you're saying, Michelle. So I think I need to hear more perspectives. I need to think more about it. I really think that having passion for the district and history here is an asset, but I would hate to exclude people that could come in and be a real fixer and really, like you just said, clear the air. But I would need to hear more of the pros and cons of both sides. But I'm more leaning towards someone that is really committed to taking on a permanent role. But of course, if it doesn't work out, then we have the very hard decision to make to not move that person forward. So we have to think about that as well. But also just being crystal clear as to what the expectations are. And I totally agree with what Michelle Horgan said. Really setting whoever it is, interim, permanent, auditioning, not auditioning, setting them up for success and not setting them up for failure.
Thank you. Anna, you want to go? And then
All right.
I'll try to
bring
wrap it
home.
up.
So I think I'm probably, based on what everyone else has said, in a closer position to what Michelle Bailey is saying, actually, on this. I personally think this is a really interesting opportunity for us to get someone to come in and really give us that tough love with zero expectation that there's a carrot dangling at the end. Because I think the problem with auditioning, even if there's that little asterisk to say, well, you still have to apply, it's going to skew the feedback that you get from people. And I think right now our district would really benefit from truly, brutally honest feedback about what is or is not working. And I think that if you complicate the relationship from the outset, we will get less candid feedback. So I like the idea of a truth teller coming in and really taking a hard look at what's gone on historically. I think one of the things that's interesting to me about the narratives going on, there's this narrative that we have this hard time keeping superintendents, we have all this turmoil, but in reality, Mark Harvey was here for quite some time, and I think in some ways we are still recovering, and this is sort of something David was saying, I think we're still actually recovering from his departure. If you think of it like Marvel Universe style, that was the Nexus event that broke us off into something new. And then we had Dr. Kuchenberger, and that didn't work out. We've had Mary Beth, and that's not working out. So I think it's a little bit unfair to say that it's sort of constant turmoil. I think we're still reeling from Dr. Harvey's departure, to be honest. So I kind of feel like I would like to see someone come in from the outside with no expectation that they'll stay, give us the tough love that we need, and really give the district time to process what we want. And one of the things I'm mindful of is that Mary Beth put into motion a dramatic series of changes. And we really don't know what's going to come of that this year. I feel like there's a lot of newness already in the district. I personally like the idea of not trying to have more incremental changes. I think the other thing too for me about having like a one-year position that is going to end, we have on the table the world language visioning process, we have the portrait of the graduate process, we have a strategic planning process, all of which are meant to say, who do we want to be when we grow up? What kind of district do we want to be? And for me personally, I feel like I would like since those wheels are set in motion, right, we're not going to not do those things. They're part of our budget. They're part of our district goals. I kind of feel like I want to see what those processes yield, because I think that will inform what kind of superintendent we're looking for. But I think right now we don't know what kind of district we want to be. Therefore, for me, I have a hard time identifying, well, what features would I look for in a permanent superintendent when we get to that process? And I also think I would benefit from a really veteran set of eyes looking at us and looking at all the changes and saying, wow, sort of like a SWOT analysis, to just say, like, this is what is historical and works, and you should keep it at all costs. These are the legacy parts of your district that you should be proud of. There might be legacy parts of our district that we need to get rid of immediately, and that's going to come out in that visioning process. There might be operational issues that someone with a different perspective who's not part of the existing system could look for those things, and maybe they'll find redundancies, or maybe they'll find opportunities. And then we can build all of that in to the next round of saying, okay, now we kind of have a better sense of who we're looking for. We have a better sense of our strengths and weaknesses. We'll have time for a community process. And I think from an HR standpoint, removing the carrot dangling, assuming that works, to your point, you guys tried that before. It didn't necessarily work out the way you wanted it to, and so you went back and revisioned it. But I think, to me, that feels like the right place to start and see what happens. And if we have to go back again, if we're not getting anyone we like, then we can adjust. But my first plan would be as I have described.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm going to speak as a member of the committee, and then I'm going to try to make a stab at sort of some overview of what we've said so far, and then we're going to make sure that everybody feels like they've got plenty of extra time to ask questions of each other, and so never fear, it's not your only chance to talk. First, I guess I want to say that even coming in today, I was of the mindset that there's not only one way to achieve this successfully. I really believe that. And there's a lot of wisdom in this room, and I am open to it. So I do have an opinion, and I'm going to share that, but I want to just let everyone know that I feel like I'm really excited from going around once. I feel excited that we have tons of wisdom, and we're going to come to something this evening. I feel confident. What I see is a need for someone to come in with a tremendous amount of experience, I think, someone that can be forthright. Somebody said stabilization. I think stabilization, I hesitate to use that word because I certainly don't want that to imply stagnation. I think this year we have an incredibly strong leadership team, and they are already moving forward on our agreed upon goals and our initiatives that they are moving forward with, and they are deeply committed. And those things are going to move forward. And so I did say that about stabilization. I think going last, I feel like everybody said everything already, but I would value someone who is free to speak the truth and identify those things. I'm speaking for myself as the chair. Identify those things that person might see that need to be addressed, to be fixed, and specifically on the schools committee, but also in the district to shine a light. I'm looking for someone that might be able to shine a light. So, okay, so that's, yes, Anna?
If this is totally inappropriate, please, everyone say so. But I would be sort of curious to hear, your point about wisdom got me thinking. I would love to hear what Dorothy's perspective is on this, because you know our district and our committee well, but you also know the landscape. So I'd be curious to know what you might recommend. And then if they're comfortable and it's not inappropriate, I would actually love to hear from Tom and Vinny and Stacy as well, some people closer to the heartbeat
Can I-
about what they might think.
So-
Not that that might be inappropriate.
No,
but I'd be
I
curious
actually
about-
don't think it's inappropriate. I think it's appropriate. I'm wondering whether the committee feels like we want to do a little more discussion before we hear from everyone else, or is the committee ready to hear
Yeah, because
from
there's
other
definitely
people?
something I want to bring up that sort of got brought up a couple times.
Yeah. So am I hearing that for you, David, you'd like to just pause on that for a moment? Okay.
Definitely.
But I don't think that's inappropriate. I would like to, I think that's a perfectly valid question. David, go ahead.
So to go and say again, that when we had the last interim, we sort of lucked out with what we got, and we got that person who was brutally honest with this district. And the subcommittee did not put their name forward because this district did not like hearing that. If you put this in anybody else's hands, you run that risk, right? So if you say you're going to bring this, and this is the person you want to try and bring in, there's backlash.
So, David, that is, I want to echo that is actually exactly what I'm talking about in terms of the wisdom, right? That, like, I love the way that you phrased that. If we move, which is just, that's what we need to have is open conversation. If we decide to move in that direction, and we're not saying that we're going to, but what would we need to do to ensure that history didn't repeat itself? Right, that's what I heard. Like, if we were to move that way, how would we ensure and that would be a question we would need to answer, right? Is how would we, as the leaders of the district, how would we, am I correct in what I'm hearing from you?
I know I've really only spoken to you about this offline, but it's, this is, this is a big hole you're about to dig, big hole. And like I said, I'm not necessarily sure I want to dig 2 more holes.
Yeah. So we could talk back, David and I could talk back and forth, but I don't want to do that. I want everyone I'm going to hold my thought and let other people talk. So.
I'd like to second kind of what David said, is that we've done it twice. We've done it twice where we have had an interim. And Glenn Kuchar will tell you, one of the top 3 worst meetings he has ever had to attend was here in Hamilton Wenham, when we had to decide if we were going to allow someone who had been appointed as the interim to become a candidate. And there was a big community meeting, and he was there. Because when an interim comes in and is then auditioning for the job, they're at a disadvantage because anything that they've done that is change and has made people feel uncomfortable is held against them. And so it's not that it just happened once with Julie, it happened before, before Dr. Harvey came. So if your goal is to hire someone that's auditioning, the chances are, from the historical perspective of Hamilton Wenham, is it's going to be bad for that person. Both times that has happened, that person ultimately has not become the superintendent. And it's been because the public outcry for that person not to go forward.
Yeah.
So
I thank you.
I'm strongly encouraging you not to do that.
So, and I would, because I'm really trying, but what I would like to say is actually the same thing that I just said to David, which is what I'm hearing, is that if we were to go in that direction, one of the things we need to be very certain of is how to make sure that that doesn't repeat itself.
I'm
So,
unclear if we could answer that question. Yes.
But I hope that you see that I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yes,
ask the same.
that
Like,
would be-
you're identifying what you foresee as a potential pitfall.
Correct.
And it's different than the one that David is identifying. But also, you're saying that that would be something that if we were to go in that direction for you, we would need to identify how to proactively ensure that that didn't occur again, because you've seen it happen
Twice.
twice. Thank you, Julia.
So I guess the question for me is, don't we want a permanent superintendent, though, that is willing to take the backlash? Because there's going to be backlash, doesn't matter, permanent, interim, anyone, there will be backlash. I'm just thinking, the hiring process might get ugly, but I'm thinking even if this person is permanent, and they're still saying the same things, they would still get backlash. So what's the difference between whether they get it when they're an interim or they get it when they're permanent?
So I'm going to because I think, I do want us to have a discussion, and it sounds like that was a question from Julia to Michelle. Is that
Yeah, or maybe
correct?
to David, just
Right.
people
So
that have history
if people
with
are
this.
comfortable, because I know Jen and Michelle and Anna haven't had another opportunity, are we comfortable having a brief response to Julia's question? Are people comfortable with that? Okay, because I want people to feel like they get their opportunity. So I think that was to Michelle and to David, is that correct?
Historically, I'm just trying to.
Historically, people come in and they tell us, we need to do things differently, or there's problems with this, or there's problems with that, which is fine. But then the problem is, then they have to go through a second process of being judged, and it's really hard to tell people the truth, who are then, if it's negative, who are then going to have to decide if they're going to hire you. So when you have an interim who then is sort of auditioning, they don't get the same grace as a superintendent who comes in newly hired. And there's oftentimes you'll hear there's like a honeymoon period, like everybody gives the person a break for the first year, and they'll kind of go with the flow until people kind of figure it out. And so you're taking that away from a permanent superintendent if you have them be the interim. And I've seen it happen twice, and and I've lived through both, and both of them were the community outcry was that person should not be hired. Julie Kuchenberger was not put forward because the community people who were on the screening committee did not feel she was the right person. So the person before was not put forward because the community came to a meeting with an outcry that person should not be put forward. And then the committee's in a position, if they do put that person forward, the community's already has the axe to grind. So you're putting their neck on the line instead of giving them a honeymoon suite.
Thank you.
You're setting them up to fail before they're even.
Well, you're taking away their opportunity to have that grace period.
Okay.
David, did you have an answer or? You don't have to. It's okay if you don't.
I hear what Michelle is saying, and she said something very difficult there, so I guess I'll say something very difficult here, too. I know from being on this board and going through that process that it felt like we had our legs kicked out from under us when we got the 3 candidates, and there were 2 names missing that most of the board felt. And the board voted to add Julie's name to the list, but, the damage was already done there. And because operationally, as most of you guys know, it's a lot different on that side of the table in understanding how this district works. And I'm very nervous about putting this decision in other people's hands who don't know as much as we do. I have no problem saying that, because I really think the system failed us last time. I'm not saying she was a failure, but the fact that we're back here 14 months later means the system failed.
Thank you. I want to give Anna and Michelle and Jen an opportunity to talk again or ask questions. Go ahead, Anna.
Well, I think in response to Julia's question and sort of, I think it seems like the question we're sort of discussing is, would the interim be allowed to apply? I think that seems like the heart of the matter, and not wanting to be redundant, but I think what Michelle is saying, I said it sort of differently, which is the quality of the feedback you get, it will be different, regardless of whether or not you mean it to be. I also think if someone is sort of thinking in their mind, wow, this might be a district I want to, make a more permanent home, invest in, I think it's almost impossible for someone who has leadership interest and background to not then start thinking about the things you might actually change. So I think this idea of not wanting, we want to stabilize. Like, this should not be a period of massive growth. I just think it's impossible to suspend your desire for change and innovation if that's at all looming in the background. And I really do think the candor of the feedback would change. But I also want to take a step back because to me, and maybe this is because I don't have the same historical background, this is not unique to Hamilton Wenham. It's not unique to schools. It's not unique to education. I mean, we're just talking about filling a leadership position that's very difficult. And it happens in all industries. We're replacing our CEO, and we need to find someone quickly because we have a school year upon us, which is not really different than trying to find someone to stabilize a fiscal year. You have a big event coming. Like, you need someone nominally at the helm. But we know that we need to think more carefully about the next long-term step. So I kind of want to depersonalize a little, and look forward. I think what Michelle is saying is really valid. It's happened twice. I think it's happened twice not because of anything specific to Hamilton Wenham. I think that interim positions are interim for a reason. I think that's why the position exists as the type. So in any industry, in any sector, if that's what we're going to do, I think we should really try to stay true to that and then let the usual process run its course. And that's a totally different thing to talk about. But none of this to me is indicative of anything special about us. We just need to get someone in who can make sure we don't completely implode legally and financially in the next, really it's a short period of time. We're talking October 1st to by the time that we would complete the process, and again, Dorothy, correct me if I'm wrong, but we need to identify and start thinking about having an offer for a permanent superintendent by March or April, right? I mean, we start. So really, we're talking literally about 6 months. So to Jen's point, this person doesn't even have the 6 months to figure it out. It is literally a stopgap. So I think we need to embrace it for what it is and then really put our high energy, and I think David's starting to get to this point, we need to do a better job with the permanent search process. That's the thing that has broken down for us. That's, I think, where we should focus our energies. We just need to get through the next 6 months as best we can and really think about what does this district need and who do we want to lead it, and that process will take some good, thoughtful time. But right now is not the time, I think, for too much hemming and hawing.
Thank you. So I haven't forgotten that we do want to, Anna had asked that the rest of the people chime in, but I do want to give Michelle and Jen, I'm not sure whether either one of you want to chime in again, but I want to give you opportunities to ask questions or respond to what you've heard.
So I hear what a lot of people are saying, but my worry is we're starting all of this new stuff. And if we hire somebody who has no knowledge of these new ideas and procedures, are we hiring somebody who can actually follow through on them? Or are we just going to lose a whole year? Instead of, bringing in somebody who knows the procedures, knows what's going on, and can, at the very least, keep us on in a forward-moving direction. I just would hate to stall.
Thank you. Michelle?
I guess just following up on what Jennifer said is that we have to, as we all have always done, is keep the children, students front and center, and do what's best for them. And I feel like we are, it's between a rock and a hard place. But again, I think if we just listen what we're doing now to what we're all saying and keep the kids and the students as our goal, as making sure that we take care of them. That's what we just continue to do.
Thank you. And I am going to take my turn to respond to, and then I'm going to turn our attention to Tom and Vinny and Dorothy. Jen, I think that I wanted to respond because I think you made a good point, and I do see it a little bit differently, but I think it's a really important, essential point. What I see in our district, and this is my opinion, is an exceptionally strong leadership team who is ready to, not just ready, but actually actively doing it already, leading the district forward. And I hear your concern about wanting to make sure that that happens. And I share that concern, and coming at it at a little bit of a different view, which is that my view is that that leadership team is that having this kind of the idea of an interim who is going to be really shining a light and speaking some truth and not auditioning allows that leadership team. We put them in a place where they can really own the part of that and take it and run with it, because it is really clear that we've achieved that this year, the clear goals and the clear path. So, but I really want to, I share that concern that I think almost everyone has, this would be me summarizing rather than my own opinion, but I noticed that in general, nobody really said, oh, we just need someone, a warm body, that's all we need. We don't need anything else, just a warm body. I think we're all looking very thoughtfully about how to make sure that we don't stall out. So I think we're, sharing that. At this point, Anna asked a question. I can't believe you asked, I believe, Dorothy a question, and then or just for an opinion, and it might be valuable to hear if people are willing, Vinny and Tom and then Dorothy, to offer your opinions. Was that accurate, Anna, about what you were asking?
Yeah, no, it is. I think I really value feedback from people on the ground. So Stacy's here too. I mean, I think your point about the leadership team is really solid in terms of where we are. But I would appreciate, I have thoughts too about what everyone is saying. But I would like to hear from them if they're comfortable speaking candidly to us about what you think might work best. Because ultimately, I'm going to try to say this very carefully. This is, to me, the people who help the kids the most, to Michelle Horgan. I'm going to channel Michelle Horgan here as best I can. That the people who keep the kids most on track, in my opinion, are the people closest to the kids. Those, I think, it's almost like in some ways the figurehead is a leader, and, the superintendent is a figurehead, and it's a leadership position, but ultimately how it gets put into play happens at a much more granular ground level. And so part of my thought with that is I want to hear from the people who are going to have to implement and get through this year. We're the policy body, but you're the ones who have to implement. And I think Dorothy has wisdom to share. And I think the thought I had about stagnation in the leadership team is I think we've built in, not stagnation, but I think we've built in a pause on everything with the strategic planning. Like this year, to Jen, this will sound negative and it's not meant to be. I think this is already kind of a lost year in terms of making big innovative changes because we've purposely planned to have all these visioning processes. So I don't really think this would have been a year to do anything different. I kind of think of it like recovery. We're recovering, and the day after you run a marathon is not the day to say, well, I'm still going to run a 10K. That's the day that you rest. So I'm not saying I want to cool our heels, but we have a recovery period, and my concern about all the changes Mary Beth was going to put through, and ultimately were now implemented, were too much change during a recovery period. I think, anyway, that's another issue. I would like to hear from the people on the ground.
Thank you. I want to make sure, and everyone here knows, I'm new to being the chair, but I want to be mindful, and Dorothy, I would look if you have, but I want to be mindful of what we're asking Vinnie and Tom, because I certainly don't want to put them in a position. So I think the question, and Anna, you posed it, so the question is, I think more generally, I think we're not really going to be asking you whether we should be choosing someone who's auditioning or not. I think that's, I don't want to put you in a position that it feels, but I think what Anna's asking is sort of some insights into what your dream is in terms of what the role that the superintendent is, what kinds of qualities you might be looking for. Does that seem accurate?
Especially for this year.
Yeah, for this year specifically, yeah.
So one of the big things for me is just someone who's going to be honest with us as a school committee and kind of tell us almost what we don't want to hear to keep us on track and not have these kind of long, drawn-out meetings where we're not very efficient or effective. I mean, I don't know how many meetings we had this year that I think went past midnight, and during that kind of hour, no one's really thinking clearly, and a lot of arguments happen. So someone who knows school committee policy and procedure and can help us run an effective meeting. And then kind of the next two biggest things is, for me at least, is somebody who has not only budget experience, but a regional budget experience. The next two budget cycles are probably going to be very contentious. So someone that can at least steer us through this next round of budgets. And then lastly, mostly like with what Anna said, there's a lot of things happening this year. We have the strategic plan, the portrait of the graduate, a lot of our district goals, and the world language debate, and those things can't really sit stagnant. They have to move forward, so somebody coming in at least has to have some sort of knowledge about pushing these kind of agenda items forward, because we can't sit by for another year with nothing moving forward. It's only going to be the students who ultimately suffer. So I don't know the ultimate answer on who, what, or when, but those are the big things for me at least.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom?
Sure, it's tough to go after Vinnie. I was going to start off by saying what you did, Madam Chair, is you have a strong leadership team in the district, which I'm proud to be part of. I think we also have the benefit of having approved district goals, and they're not just lofty goals. I mean, I believe it's a work plan for whoever you choose to be the superintendent. So personally, I would like to see somebody that has the talent to shepherd all of this work. Defer to the leadership team as much as possible. And I'm not saying that selfishly, it's because I respect the talent of the team. The district goals were exciting to adopt and to have this work plan forward. So that's really what's my top priority as an employee, is making sure that these are actually completed.
Thank you. And then I think, Anna, your question to Dorothy was really, what does she see,
What
right?
is her-
What does she
what
see
is
here?
her advice to
Yeah.
us?
So I'm going to say that
Can you be close to the microphone? Sorry.
thought I was close enough. Okay.
Yeah. there you
So
go.
I sort of dip in and out, right? I'm not here day to day. I'm not here at all your meetings. I'm not here for a lot of discussions. So I don't feel it would be right for me to advise you on the correct course of action. But I do want to, in this discussion, I think there's just some advice, not even necessarily, this isn't advice on a direction to go, but just to let you know different possibilities, right? So you're thinking now about, do we want someone who will audition or not? When you advertise, the decision is, are you going to advertise saying whoever takes the position would not be eligible to apply for a permanent position? But if you decide not to do that, then you would not say, we only want people who are auditioning, right? So you could open it up. In fact, if you remember the first time with the search that failed, you actually had one candidate who was not a sitting or a retired superintendent, who would have been coming in, and it didn't work out, and that's, that happens, right? But you wouldn't be saying, there's not a this or that, there's sort of a this and then a combination of a this and a that, if that makes any sense
I
whatsoever.
mean, just to clarify, so meaning that if you chose to advertise a position where there was specifically that the person was not eligible to apply, that would be the only time it would be qualified. Otherwise, it would just be advertised as an interim position.
Right. And then you
Clear.
would probably get applications of both types,
Correct.
right? So if you have someone who's there as an interim, so I know different communities have different flavors, different things work in different communities. Ultimately, the school committee hires the superintendent. The search process is in the hands of the school committee. So, in fact, you did not even have to do a search. You could have gone right ahead and appointed someone without doing the search. There's also the possibility, if you do a search and you have a search committee, that you have members of the school committee participate on that search committee, which would give it, more of the school committee voice as you're going through that search process. So in terms of thinking about what happened in the past and other ways things might work, those are just some things to keep in mind. And I fear I may be complicating things more than simplifying things, but there's some possibilities out there that you haven't really discussed, and I don't know if the people who are newer on the committee actually know those are possibilities, right? So that there are different nuances to the way you do a search. There are places that will not do a search. They'll say, we need a new superintendent. Sometimes Glenn walks in and says, you could appoint me to superintendent tonight. Please don't, but don't, Glenn would not. Ultimately, the person who sits as superintendent is the decision of the school committee. And the process to getting there is also the decision of the school committee. So I don't know if that's helpful or confuses things.
That's very helpful, and I, if I can, reflect on some things that our more experienced members expressed, is that whatever the ultimate process is that's very helpful for us to hear that we can make it different, because it sounds like what I'm hearing is that the process could be different and could have felt better, I think. Is that accurate?
Well, hindsight is 20/20.
Correct.
There should have been a different makeup of.
Okay, and so now, I guess what I'm saying is that it's easy, but when we're looking forward, we can learn from that, and Dorothy's giving us information that we could do things differently. There's not only one way to do it. That doesn't mean we would have a magic crystal ball about what's going to happen in the future, but, okay. So, does anyone have any, I want to, again, do questions. Does anyone have any questions? And I'm not going to push us forward if people aren't ready, but does anyone have any questions? Like Anna just asked a question of Dorothy. Does anyone have any questions like that, process questions, any questions of each other? David, you look like maybe you did, or you're not, is it not really a question?
Yeah, no, because I think it's a question, but it's a
Yep.
question for, for the committee. And the question is, how much do you want to get done this year? We do have this strong leadership team in place. We do have these goals in place. So how much do you want to get done? There's the distance we would have got had Mary Beth stayed. There's the distance that, we can get to with an interim, just making sure nothing else burns and letting our leadership team lead. And then I think there's a distance in between where if we find someone that's already here that can come and sort of push us along a little bit further. I don't think we'll get as far as if it was Mary Beth, but I do think it would be further than if it was just somebody off the street. I do think we'll move forward anyway, but, having been through this, and now granted, COVID screwed up everything, so it's really hard to gauge anything, but like, we haven't made great strides in the past few years, right? And I think that's something that we all join this committee wanting better out of our already great district, right? Like just knowing that we can get that forward. So it's, how much do we want to sort of really push this year to really accomplish these lofty goals that we have? That's this question I have, whether it's rhetorical or not, but.
Thank you. Yeah. I heard it as rhetorical, but if other people have an actual response, Jen?
Can we get overlap in between Mary Beth's ending and whoever is starting?
Thank you. I actually have an answer for that question. So no, I thank you, because and David is saying no, but my understanding is that, and Dorothy and Vinny is that it might be possible to have some days of overlap. That wouldn't be the same thing as, them working the entire time necessarily together, but hypothetically.
You can only have one superintendent.
Dorothy, you can answer, because that was,
You can only have one superintendent, but you could have someone coming in and started getting established and learning the ropes.
That's
They
right.
would
You could
not
have them
hold the
shadowing, yeah.
position.
right,
Yes.
Like as a consultant.
right.
Well, I think Mary Beth came in early.
It was days. I mean,
Days,
Julie
but-
did the same thing.
Julie
We're
did the
talking
same
like a
thing,
handful
yeah.
of days.
Right, and that, but to answer, I mean, just because I did ask that question, and the response I got was that that is a possibility, but not likely for they wouldn't both be working full-time, but,
And they do exchange like phone numbers, like, it's not like
did that answer your question, or do you want?
died and you can't call her.
Yeah, okay. Anna?
I have a statement that becomes a question. So in response to David's statement, I think it's interesting to me that both Tom and Vinny kind of used the word shepherd and talked about shepherding the processes that are already in place and leaning on the leadership team and the existing talent. But that word shepherd is interesting because really the goals are very much visioning. It's the strategic plan, it's these changes the leadership team will execute. But it's interesting that really, I do think we're kind of in a holding pattern. So to answer your question, I feel like we need someone who can execute the goals and has experience with strategic planning and a portrait of a graduate. Tom has submitted yet another big building application. Like, I think we need someone who can just follow the playbook, which then leads me to this question, which is actually kind of for Vinny. So not so much can they overlap, but if we identify someone, let's say we post this next week, and we have someone 3 weeks from now, do we have to wait until October? Or could we let Mary Beth go, buy out the rest of her contract? I know there's a financial cost here, but could we let her go sooner so that we don't have 3 months of sort of a lame duck superintendent and bring a new person on sooner to get going faster?
Are you speaking financially?
Well, both legally and financially.
I think that answers the question, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we might run over a little bit, but I'm sure we could find the funds depending on how long you're talking about. I wouldn't recommend like more than 3 weeks or something.
Okay.
But
But financially, we're obligated to pay out Mary Beth's contracts to October 1st, no matter what happens, which I understand.
Yes. Yep.
But whether or not she's actually the superintendent until October 1st seems to be a slightly unrelated question.
I believe she did put in vacation time towards the end, but
Yeah,
I don't think
and
that's
I
what you're
think,
referring to.
yeah, I think we might,
Well, my concern isn't so much the I mean, I know there'd be a financial cost, but I'm just thinking in terms of implementation, right? Like, we have someone we know we need to bring in. We have someone who we know is leaving. Instead of sort of waiting to start all of that on October 1st, could we start it sooner?
so I'm going to step in and sort of say, I think we're getting a little ahead of where we are.
Right.
So I think those are questions that we might need to answer, but they're not actually the questions that we need to answer tonight. I think tonight we really need to get clarity on, I have a little box where I wrote down, like, how will I know whether we have achieved tonight, right? And I have sort of written down that we would know whether we're, hiring an interim or a permanent, which we've pretty much gotten consensus on, and whether we would be saying that this person is, I guess specifically whether they are ineligible, whether we're specifically saying this is a one-year position, and then sort of a brief consensus about what the role is that we're looking for. And I think that's what we need to achieve tonight, so I think we might be ahead a little bit. Also, I think financially, it might be a similar question that you and Jen asked, really, financially, about whether or not there's some potential overlap. Okay.
So what does the tree say right now?
Well,
I just have one clarifying question.
Please,
Just to
yes.
absolutely clarify, so the decision is whether or not we put on the job application, this is a one-year position, you're ineligible to apply, or whether
Correct.
we just don't put that in.
correct. And just to be clear, that statement, so if the job posting said, and I don't know exactly what it would say, the person is not eligible to apply for the permanent position, that would signal to people what type of position this is, and we would get a certain kind of candidate. And, correct? I mean, so that would be a signal to people about what it is that we're looking for. Okay.
Could I just add one thing? So however this gets posted, I'm assuming you would like MASC to post it on our website. I'm assuming you would like us to make sure people are aware, right? And so the way that you decide to post it is also going to be guide the phone calls that would get made, right? There are people we would call or wouldn't call, right, depending on how it gets posted.
Right, exactly, right, so that's very helpful, right? So part of what we're doing is really giving Dorothy as much clarity so that she can, do some legwork for us and look and, yeah.
Well, have we even gotten there yet?
No, we're not there, no, we're not there yet.
Because
Nope, we're not there yet.
I'm really not excited about going through 2 hiring phases this year. I just did it 14 months ago.
So just to be clear, because I really do think I know what you're saying, but you're not saying that you want to hire the permanent person right this second. You're saying that
I'm saying that we have to decide whether
that we would be,
we want to sit there and make a decision as a board, or if we want to go through, bringing in candidates, or that's still that process. Do we want to advertise? How long do we want to do that? Is there going to be a subcommittee to do it? Or is it going to be all of us? Because you're kissing August goodbye.
Kissing what goodbye?
August.
August.
I'm actually not, I thought I knew what you were saying, but I'm not really clear.
So if we advertise, if we open this for 2 weeks, starting on Tuesday, and then in 2 weeks, we start an interview process. So we're going to have to meet and interview with all these people. We're going to have to meet, select the candidates, interview all of them, and then discuss. You're literally looking at like all of August. You're going to be doing this.
Yeah,
And that's only for the interim. But then we have to meet, figure out what our plan is for the full-time, select a subcommittee, and then do this all over again, times 3.
So
It's a much bigger process.
it's a much bigger process than not doing that?
We have the authority to say,
Okay, so
we'd
you're-
like Vinnie to, step
So
up.
so just to be clear, because so you're alternative
Want to
would,
go through two full hiring processes.
I understand.
Appointing someone?
You're interested in appointing someone to an interim position, is that what you're
I think
saying?
that we should at least have the conversation.
Okay, well, that's, right, but so that is that's where you are right now. So what, because someone just asked me where my decision tree was about the posting, but you're saying that you are offering something different, which is that you would not even want to go to the posting.
Correct.
Is that correct?
I think that we have it in our authority, and I think if we want to make the most progress we have this year is, we make the decision as a board, and we figure out where we want this district to go this year sooner rather than later, and have the wheels already in motion, and then look to do a more robust search process, and then naming sort of the places we feel that needed, more support or more input, and, getting that process done so we're ready, because this also runs right into our budget season. So we're going to be doing this whole process at the same time we're doing the process of beginning our budget to hopefully get our candidates in here January to make do all the interviews and stuff to make the decisions by February, which, as we also know, is when we have to do all of our major budget things.
So just to be clear, because I know all you have done, so I know that, I wanted to be clear that, I know you, so I know you're not actually saying it's a lot of work, so we don't want to do it.
No, I'm saying it's a lot of work, I don't want to do it.
Okay. Okay.
But you don't think it's worth doing?
No.
That's
No, I
that's
think
why. It's not just that it's work, it's
Right, because-
work that might have a better, you're suggesting there might be a better alternative.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
That's what I was trying to say, is that we're not, right, because
Wait, can
right.
ask a question here? Are you saying you think we should not appoint an interim, but that we should appoint a superintendent?
I think he's saying we should appoint an interim
Well,
superintendent.
I'm asking him that. Is that
Yes,
what
I think we should appoint an interim superintendent.
So we should appoint, so you're saying we should appoint an interim superintendent without posting it, and then have a search for a regular?
Yes.
So how would we know who the candidates are?
Well, I think that that's something that we can do within and say that we want to look at internal candidates, and then we can discuss through the negotiation subcommittee with, people we might identify to see where we go from there.
How is that different? So how is doing a candidate interview process with
We could
internal
be done
only?
by Friday.
Could we?
Well, not technically.
But just to back up, I think, to Anna's point, because I do hear you, but also what I hear in that is sort of what I was talking about is the idea of appointing an interim who is a potential long-term candidate is what you're proposing, right? That's what you would be looking at.
I mean,
Is a potential, this interim, you wouldn't be excluding that person from applying. You would be saying,
yeah.
right. So I think Anna's question is, how is that going to be, how is that going to be different than a posting, to what Dorothy said, of other than the amount of work, how is that going to generate a different result than just posting that says an interim candidate, period?
Because then you have to go through an entire selection process. Like, we have to call quorum meetings to go through an entire selection process to weed out who we want to come into interview. And then again, more quorum meetings to actually interview all the candidates and then make a decision. It's about a month's worth of work to do it quickly.
Yes, so I mean, I think there might be value in asking Dorothy what you see as just the logistics of, if we were to post, because we've talked about, so if we were to post just an interim position, what steps are typical for a committee to take?
I think David pretty well has described it. The position would get posted. There'd be a deadline for the application. you could either have a subcommittee or just have the full committee look at all the applications, decide who to bring in for interviews, bring them in for the interviews, and then make a decision. I think David pretty much
Okay.
outlined that would be the process.
Thank you. And in your experience, Dorothy, would that be, I mean, I understand we need to have an expedited process, but we could do that in August, or, yeah. And to David's point, it would be extra meetings.
Yeah, what?
Anna?
I think in thinking through the process, it does sound to me that just appointing someone or soliciting internally doesn't actually sound like that much less work than posting externally. It's still a posting, review, a meeting. It might happen faster, but in terms of the workload, actually, I think the volume of work to me sounds actually rather similar, whether it's internal or external. And then pragmatically, I'm thinking, it's June 20th. By the time we get it organized and posted.
July 20th.
Sorry, July 20th.
We wish it was June 20th.
But realistically, let's say it's posted by August 1st. It has to marinate for a good 3 weeks. I don't actually see it as eating up all of August. I see it as making for a very busy early September. The only other point that hasn't been raised that I do feel somewhat compelled to raise is just in terms of equal employment and opportunity. As a public body, as a public agency, as a taxpayer-funded institute, I don't like the idea of not opening it up to the outer world to see who might be available. I think for me, that doesn't feel as good because we really don't know who's out there, and by only, if we sort of short-circuit it to only an internal position, we are by default limiting our pool in a way that from an EEOC perspective doesn't feel as open to me. And I feel like with all that we're trying to do and become in terms of DEI and hiring and looking at our workflow and looking at our staff, I feel like we're being a little bit hypocritical if we just immediately say, well, we're going to start internal and we're not going to open it to the outside world.
Thank you. Jen?
My question is if we do bring in an internal candidate from a historical perspective, do you think that candidate will have more community support because they already are a member of the community?
They haven't,
I see, that's why I asked.
not in the past.
Right, and so I think it's a good question and also one that we need to be really mindful of, that like past doesn't necessarily predict future, right?
Sure.
So that's a good question, and
I just didn't know if it was something we'd run into before.
We've had 2 interims who were told were hired under an assumption that they could apply, who ultimately were not put forward by the community.
But were they part of the community before they were an interim?
One of them was.
Okay.
so I don't want to, I want to walk a fine line here between, I want to make sure that everyone has enough time to discuss, and I also know that our committee sometimes could talk forever. And so at some point, we're going to need to actually have a vote, and we're going to need to vote on a direction. So I would sort of, if anyone has any thoughts on whether you feel like we're ready to vote, and if you don't feel like we're ready to vote, I'd like to hear what it is that you think we need to do next. So
What would be the motion?
I think we would ask our secretary to craft the motion, but my suspicion is that it would be something around, well, I guess we could entertain motions. My thought would be that the motion would be something around posting an interim position in which we specifically state that the person is not eligible for the long-term or the reverse.
And posting it to the world, basically. Posting
Correct.
it
Well, the
externally.
MASC is going to facilitate that
As
process.
opposed to internal.
They can.
As opposed to
So we can
internal.
ask them to do that, to help us to,
Or we could ask our HR person to do that.
Just kidding.
all of our HR department, the whole department can do that.
Just kidding.
Sweating. All of a sudden.
Do we want to just get the internal, external out and on the table?
So I'm not really sure, that's a great question, and that's exactly what I was looking for in terms of like, are we ready to vote? So it's a great question. I don't even actually really know how that would get framed. I would look to our more experienced.
So, for example, I could say, I move that we as the school committee approve of a process of nominating an interim superintendent from a pool of internal candidates.
And then go from that. If that passes, then we
I mean,
decide something
if
and then.
that passes, then,
We-
right,
so it's like
we're
choose your own
going one
adventure.
down one road. If it doesn't pass, we're going down another road.
So,
Okay.
and that's total, and I like that, I'm so appreciative of you of the secretary, because did y'all notice what she said? She said, for example, I could say, and she didn't actually make the motion, which is brilliant on your part. Again, I'm deferring to the wisdom of the committee. To me, I'm not seeing the question as being internal versus an external posting. That's not how I'm seeing it, but other people are seeing it differently, and so, we might, that. Does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I mean, we need to figure out what the process is, right? What the process is going to be.
Correct.
Is the board going to move, excuse me, to, setting up a calendar for, a job posting and an entire hiring process? Or, is the board, it is.
So, but as internal, we would still have to post, and,
No. If it's internal, if the board decides just to select, to just go amongst ourselves and select an internal candidate, we don't need.
I think that would be a different motion than what Jen just said, though, because it sounds to me like she's saying we would make a motion to post it internally. It sounds to me like you would like to name a specific candidate and
It just depends on how the
vote.
motion goes.
Right.
And I want to say, I actually do respect Anna's, what you actually said about that. And that is definitely something to think about that I was overlooking. I'm looking at just the additional 2 months of having somebody right alongside that we're going to, that if we made the decision, that they would be able to sort of get rolling. But that is definitely
So-
something to keep in mind.
Anna,
So
go ahead.
thank you.
So I think what Jen is trying to do, and I would support this, to me, the two questions we need to resolve, and I think we do need to resolve them by vote,
We do.
are, is it an internal or an external process? I think we should settle that question first, and then we can talk about the next question, which is eligible or ineligible to apply. Once those two questions are answered, I think the process of the mechanics of doing whatever yields that process is pretty straightforward. So I think that we need to directly answer internal, external, eligible or not eligible. And then the only other comment I guess I would make about any of it is that if we do have an internal process, correct me if I'm wrong, that means we've created a new vacancy that we'd have to fill without having a superintendent. Like we might fill a hole, but we will create another hole that needs filling still 6 weeks before school is to start. So that, for me, frankly, is a major consideration.
Correct. Can I, thank you for all of that. That was helpful. One thing I would ask a question, is that if we were to say internal, I'm a little hesitant about calling it internal or external, because if we create an external search, internal people can apply. So I don't want to.
Right.
No, and if we choose to
Right,
appoint-
that's not, we would not be trying to exclude internal candidates. That
And-
would not be
And
the
if the board
intent.
just chose to appoint a superintendent, like Dorothy said, we could appoint Dorothy.
Correct.
So it doesn't necessarily need to be.
So I think the question is, are we looking to appoint, or are we looking to do a hiring process? Are those the questions on the table?
Well, how would you know who to appoint if you didn't ask who's interested in being, if you don't go through a hiring process?
I don't know.
Okay, that's why I was
I
like.
guess that's the real question.
Okay.
I
No, I
mean,
think we should do, I think we should
Already
do
had
what Jen
somebody
said.
volunteer.
Right, I mean, I think,
let's
right.
just put it on the table.
Right, I mean, that's,
We've
we
already
actually
been.
do, wait, we actually do have
But
information
there
on that
may be
subject.
other people who are interested, and we
Correct.
don't have
That
any
is
way of
possible.
knowing. And to just put that one person forward without any other opportunity for any other person because they were the one who emailed is just
I'm not
not
arguing.
appropriate.
That's my EEOC issue on hyper-focus. That's the-
Yeah, I'm not arguing for that.
No, I think your motion is good, and then we can just get that off the table myself. Get it on the table
Michelle
and be done.
Horgan, or if you look thoughtful. Do you have anything to share?
Well, I mean, we're basically, we're opening the position for all interested candidates. You know, I think you said whether it's internal or external, it doesn't matter. So we're hopefully going to vote to open up the process to all interested candidates for an interim superintendent.
I actually think that the motion, which has not yet been made, would be to do an internal search, I believe. Is that correct, Jen?
Well, that's just what you mentioned.
Right, no.
I mean, I
Actually, it
could
hasn't been
change
made.
it to say an external search. I
Right.
mean,
Someone needs to make a motion.
Okay.
Yes.
Are we ready? Do we feel, I really, I'm.
Jen, make a motion, and then we'll. see.
Jen, are you ready to
Roll
make a motion?
dice.
sure.
All right.
I move that we approve the school committee nominating an interim superintendent from a pool of internal candidates.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'm going to try to restate it just to make sure. So the motion is that we that we select or hire, because I don't know that we really nominate, appoint?
Appoint.
Nominate's
No,
okay.
Nominate is okay? Okay. Nominate an interim superintendent from a pool of internal candidates. Is that your motion? Okay. Is there discussion?
So if we're going to do that, then the MASC would be out, because there's no reason for them to be involved. Is that correct?
Would that be correct?
Dorothy's like,
We're out, I mean, our involvement is how you invite us to be involved, right?
So like, I can still call Dorothy and ask her questions.
But she
mean,
wouldn't
you-
be posting it and all of that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But if we wanted, for example, help in something, you would help. Yeah, so, okay. Okay. Well, are we ready to vote? Okay, so the motion is to look to an internal pool of candidates. So that if you were voting yes, you would be voting to be doing the search within the internal pool of candidates. So all in favor? All right, that's 2 in favor. All opposed? That's 4 opposed and 1 abstention? Okay, so the motion fails. Okay. Do we want to dive right in and have another motion? Or do we want to have more discussion?
We should have another motion.
All right, Jen, you did such a nice job last time. Let's hear another motion.
So again, I'm going to say a possible motion
Yeah, hypothetical.
hypothetical would be to say that I move that we begin the hiring process of an interim school superintendent who will not be able to apply for the permanent position.
Okay.
I think I would leave that last part off.
Can we,
Well, okay, so,
I think the way to make this motion would be to move to begin the hiring process. I might even say, we'll just work with MASC right now in creating the, put that in there, and then in
and then
another
vote.
motion.
It's like you're in my decision tree.
and, yeah, and also I think, because Dorothy's going to need some guidance on like what it's going to say. So I think we should,
Right.
well, maybe afterwards we should appoint who that's
So
going to be.
maybe
Let's do that
is it
as-
really just the motion really is, shall we post an interim position with the assistance of the MASC?
Correct.
Is that, okay. Jen, you ready to make a motion?
Wait,
Let me
sorry.
just-
Oh, I'll ask
Yep,
after.
go ahead.
After the motion.
I move that the school committee begins the hiring process of a new superintendent with the assistance of the MASC. Interim superintendent.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Michelle Horgan.
An amendment?
Sure.
I would amend it to say, and such candidate cannot apply for the permanent position.
So I'm going to just hold,
Amendment.
huh?
I'd vote on the amendment.
You, okay, okay.
Well, the amendment needs a second.
I second the amendment. You said cannot.
Cannot.
I second the amendment.
Okay, so the amendment is seconded by Anna. And so now the motion would be to begin the hiring process and posting of an interim superintendent who is not eligible to apply for the permanent.
Don't we have to vote on the amendment?
That's what she
Yeah,
said.
no, I'm
Yes.
saying, yeah, right, I'm just clarifying, correct, yes. Okay, I guess we have to vote on the amendment, okay, all right.
Well, you have to just procedurally because she.
Yep.
brought it up.
Yep.
Sorry.
So, okay. Just to be clear, as a procedure, Oh.
The amendment is in the negative.
right, but,
No, the amendment is to add that to the,
correct.
Right, but it's stated in the negative. It's a cannot.
right.
Wait, so the
Well, she
amendment is
could,
to add it
no,
to the motion?
ineligible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's,
The
Okay.
amendment is in the affirmative because it's to add something.
I think that it was a valid amendment. I just,
So we're voting to add it to the motion.
Correct.
We are not actually voting on.
Nope.
we're just voting on the amendment, and we, if the amendment were to not pass, we could return to the original
Yes.
motion.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
So,
S-
Hypothetically, I would say that I move that we vote on the amendment, adding to our previous statement that the individual hired for the position is ineligible to apply for the permanent position.
I don't think you have to move it again because Michelle already did and I already
Okay.
seconded it.
But that was correct.
But that's what I would, that's what you want me to say.
You don't need to
No,
say
you
it.
don't actually need to say
Okay.
it, because she, but
So we can just
But
vote.
yes. Okay, let's vote on the amendment. So if you are voting yes, is that, Dorothy's looking at me.
I'm
like-
just looking at Julia's face.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm still confused.
Okay, so let's
Are
ask
we,
a clerical.
are we
and you-
voting on whether or not we agree with the language of the amendment and we want
Yes.
to do it?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, I thought we were just voting on whether or not to put the amendment
No.
in the motion.
The act of, the act
Well,
of
yeah,
you-
you are.
Yeah,
You're
yes.
voting to put the amendment
Yes,
in the
you could
motion.
vote, yes, you could hypothetically add it to the motion and then vote no on the motion, you could.
Okay,
But
but
yes.
so there's gonna be
Yeah.
two votes.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
no
Okay.
matter what, there's two
All right, so
votes.
right now, the only vote is, are we going to amend the motion as stated, which is to make the superintendent, the interim, ineligible to apply. So all in favor? That's 3. All opposed? That's 4. And so the amendment fails. And so the motion, the original motion, we return to, which is just that we will, just to restate the motion, that the school committee will post an interim position for superintendent with the assistance, and do a search with the assistance of the MASC.
Right.
Okay?
Did you say interim?
If I didn't, let's say it again, interim.
Okay.
Okay, so now, everyone clear on what we're voting on? Okay. All in favor? So that's 6 in favor, all opposed, 1 opposed, and the motion passes. Okay. So we're definitely having a posting, and the MASC is going to help us with that.
You're going to need somebody from this committee to be authorized to work with Dorothy, because Dorothy's going to have questions.
Okay. So my question at this point is, we do need to have, like, is there another motion? I mean, in other words, we had the amendment to the motion. Is there anyone else that wants to make any other kind of a motion? And then I do want to have a discussion about,
I think that amendment sort of took care of that other
Yep. I
motion.
just want to make sure.
I don't have another motion. I do have I guess, a question of sorts for Dorothy, just in terms of the posting. When it goes out to the usual MASC places, can we also make sure that it goes to,
Oh, yeah.
like, all the different places that superintendents of any background might go to? I mean, I'm not sure what those places
Well,
are,
it's-
but
I
I'm
mean-
counting on you that you know in
Yeah,
terms
I
of
mean,
like.
we could circulate it as widely as we circulate any other posting,
Okay.
if that would be the desire of the, you're not likely to get somebody from California to come in for an interim position that they can't stay for permanently unless they
That's
really
But-
want to
but
come back to
we just
We
took-
got someone
Massachusetts.
from Vermont, so.
Right.
Well, we
No.
just took the non-permanents off.
Right, we
so-
didn't say,
Ah,
right,
right.
right, we just said, right.
Right.
So I guess that's my question, is
Right.
I'd like,
Yeah,
I would like
yeah.
this, I would recommend that the search be as broad as possible.
Yeah, we can certainly, yeah.
So Dorothy, what do you need from us so that you feel like you have what you need to leave this evening?
I need to know who here has the authority to say, yes, this is what we want, go ahead and post it.
Meaning the wording of the
Yeah.
qualifications and the role,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Volunteer, I can volunteer for that. I've worked on a lot of search committees
So
and
you're-
written a lot of job descriptions.
Well, it's
Okay.
almost all
I
done.
don't know.
but we need
We'll write
to,
it together.
right, we'll
We
need
already
to,
have one written up from a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
so.
so,
Need someone to say it's okay.
right, she needs a person to,
I'll just say that it really should be Dana if she's
Oh, it
possible.
should be. Okay.
Just because there's gonna be something come up.
So-
Always is.
well, I guess, because I think I heard it two different ways, right? That you're looking for, what I heard, two different things in what you said. One was what Julia answered, which is like, who's gonna like synthesize this information and make sure that it's clear? And then the separate one, I think Michelle Bailey is asking, is who has the authority to tell you, right? Is that, right? Is that correct? You're looking for who has the authority
I
to
mean,
say yes?
I can work with Julia,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we can,
Or I could work with Julia.
yeah, or
And-
you could
right,
work with
'cause
Julia and then
Dorothy and
tell
I
me.
talk, like-
I mean, you do, David's right? You've done this in the fairly recent past.
I think I
But
found
the
it, I'll
date,
email it to
the
everybody.
application deadline is going to change from what it was, right? That's
Yeah, I think
basically,
probably change that
yeah, I
date.
think
Yeah.
it probably should.
Well, does it need to be a subcommittee, or could it just be?
No, it really needs to be one person that
No,
way.
because we're just talking about just writing the posting.
Right,
Like
just
what
like
it's
how
gonna
it
say.
is.
or editing the posting that you had. as
I
appropriate.
assumed, I know David, I assume he's sending it to me right now. He's probably
I'm
like,
just finding the right one, because I
It's
found
just-
like a bunch of red line versions. and
The
I'm trying-
questions come up, you know what I mean? Like,
So,
something
so,
will come up. There will be
so
some
from
sort
this
of weird something
committee,
that
so
comes up.
I'm going to just say, from this committee, do we have, we need to select, it sounds like, one person who is the person, so that when Dorothy is calling and saying,
I have a question.
I have a question, that she can be speaking to one person from the committee. So we need to select, and I think we should do that by vote, who we want that person to be.
Well, and then if that one person needs input from the full committee, would we have to do it in a meeting? We would, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And ultimately, we will have to do some interviews as a committee,
Oh,
Yeah.
correct? And this is where we're going to be looking to you for all the process, all the
Yep.
steps.
Yep. I would, I mean, the postings are generally pretty boilerplate, so
Yep.
I would hope that, David could find what there was before, make whatever edits are appropriate, and it's a quick process to get it out there.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner the better, I'm open to anyone having a different opinion, but I can't imagine a positive from delaying in any way.
Where do the applications go? To
We
who?
could,
Dorothy.
they could
Okay.
either go, they could either go to you, or we could collect them for you, whichever you prefer.
Yeah,
Did they, I think, David, do you remember? Do you
We-
remember last time whether they went directly to you guys, or whether we collected them for
They
you?
went to you.
I think Glenn collected them
Yeah,
and then
Yeah.
forwarded them to us.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that
Happy
would
to
be.
do that.
Yes,
yeah,
thank
I
you.
mean, it happens both ways, so whatever you
Yeah.
prefer is fine.
yeah. Glenn collected them, and the spokesperson, whatever, was Stacy.
Anne
It
Marie.
was Stacy, some.
Yeah.
And are these resumes public?
Stacy.
No. not until we get them at the
Okay,
meeting.
so if
yeah.
if we all look at them, they will be public.
Well, but they have to be because that's the
Yes,
process we're
that,
using.
so that, yes, I mean, these are people who understand it's an interim, and they'll know, I mean, they'll know that up front that their names will be public. That's the advantage, that's part of the reason that you,
Yeah, as opposed to
as expediting the
yesterday's
search
conversation, the
process.
answer is yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, I mean, I don't know that this is a detail, but I mean, is every resume public or only those who we decide to?
All of them.
Interview.
all
How
of
will
them,
we
unless
decide?
you have a screening committee,
Okay, yep, that's fine.
they're all public.
Yep.
And, I mean, that's why you have a screening
Yep.
committee and a permanent search to narrow down the
Right.
pool. But anyone, people are going to know. They're
Yep.
going to know right off the bat that if they apply, their name is public.
Okay.
And it's, so, and part of the reason why often the resumes that you get are retired superintendents is they're not leaving a district that they're concerned is worried they're looking for another job. Right? That they've left.
Right, in a lurch at the last minute.
So it sounds like if we're able to come up with, and David is working away over there to come up with the boilerplate language.
Because now I'm wondering, did we post the interim on School Spring?
We did, but once it's filled, it's removed.
Can I just,
But
I'm
I
just, like,
don't think
reading
we
through my old
should
emails
because-
and, like,
But I-
have access to old
yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think we should because what you will get.
Me.
Right. Is just anybody with an administrator license applying. And I think what happened the last time is that Glenn,
Weeded that
vetted the people who met our qualifications out.
So that's what's going to be my next question is,
Yeah,
can
we
we
can do
set
that.
up some qualifications?
Yeah.
Or,
yeah, then
um,
we would not
right.
put anyone forward who didn't meet those. School Spring, we tend to get people who are definitely not qualified. We've gotten, oh, it's a superintendent, they must want a building a head custodian. It's a superintendent. Well, I'm a kindergarten teacher, so, but it's an education position, so I think I'll apply. I think we had a student apply once. So,
Just as a point of clarification here, we're still looking, we need to designate
Yes,
Dorothy as
we need- yes.
liaison, and then we need to establish sort of some delimiting factors, but also I think we need to establish when we want to close applications.
yeah,
right?
well, I think,
August
yes.
13th.
Yeah. You pick- you-
Well, not really, because that's a Friday, the 13th. It should be August
Friday
16th.
the 13th is, it's actually a lucky day in
We,
my
we
life,
want, I
so-
think it depends on when it gets posted, right? We want to leave it
Yeah,
up for
so,
at least
and
3
have it
weeks.
done by the
do we
23rd.
need, I'm not sure, I feel like we already, in the vote, we did designate that the MASC is going to help us with the search.
I mean,
so-
who's she going to talk to? Is she going to talk to Julia? Is she going to talk to you?
Yeah, so we need to designate, Julia, what, we need, that's okay, we can talk about you. So we do, so I would entertain a motion from someone to select who should be the liaison to Dorothy.
I mean, it's got to be somebody who's going to be here in the next 2 weeks.
For the next 4 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, and
It's not me.
Well, I mean,
or at least one.
I'm not, but I do talk to Dorothy on a, daily basis.
Yeah, just feel like it's, yeah.
Just for the past couple of weeks.
I would move that we authorize Dana to speak on behalf of the committee in the process of organizing the hiring process.
Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Anna. One of our members is,
Can I ask a question about them?
yes, please do.
Okay, so who would Dana then also be in charge of setting up the meeting schedule, or who's
So,
going to be in charge
so
of that?
as I'm about to send this to you, we have to put together the timeline.
I think it needs to be today, right, that we make that schedule, or is that what we're going
I
to
think,
do?
well, we also need to inquire with Dorothy whether that makes sense to set a meeting schedule.
So they know when we're going to interview?
Even I was underplaying how much.
At the very least,
Pencil some in.
pencil in when you think the final vote would take place.
That's the old
Right, so,
timeline that we put up.
David, in what you had before, was there a timeline in that?
It is, and I'm
Yeah.
about to, right what I'm about to forward to everybody.
Yeah.
That's the interim. Yeah.
But did we stick with that?
So, and we do have an open motion on the floor, but we're going to pause for a moment.
So I know, if you're sort of looking, I know that the original timeline, the end date for the interim was right in early May.
So the
Yeah.
timeline is, sorry, I just lost it again. March 27th begins, the school committee approves the interim job listing, right? And so there was about a week or two of back and forth emails getting this together with the subcommittee we had. And finalist interviews were May 22nd, so it was a 2-month process,
Okay, and we need to be expedited from that.
expedited from the expedited process,
Well, May 22nd?
May 22nd.
Okay.
Was that the second one, though?
I think that was the second.
That was the second one.
So this was the.
Because the first one, was it a different day?
It was
'Cause
in
right.
early, I can
I
tell
was
you it was in
somewhere else.
early May because right after the first round of interviews, I left for England.
Right.
and
Yeah.
that was an
So
early
I'm going
May.
to I'm going to interrupt because we actually have an open motion on the floor, which we
Yeah.
paused briefly. So the motion on the floor is to authorize the chair, myself, to be the liaison to answer Dorothy's questions and regarding the posting and communicate with Dorothy. Do you have questions? No. Okay. So, and that's been motioned and seconded. Is all in favor? All right, and that is unanimous. So I, Dana Alera, will be the liaison to Dorothy and the MASC. I think ideally we should come with well, how many meetings do we actually need? So if we assume that we can create the posting,
Probably need two.
we need a meeting for interviews.
You need a meeting to decide who to bring in for interviews.
So we need 2 meetings,
Yeah.
at least.
Well, it depends on how many interviews you want to do in an evening,
Right.
or how many you
Well,
want to do, right?
right. But I guess I'm not assuming we're getting thousands of
Well,
applicants,
and
but,
one of the things that we did last time that was probably wrong is that we decided who to interview, then we brought them in for a short interview, and then we brought them back for a second longer interview. And what happened during that first time and the second time is somebody else got a job and somebody else dropped out. So we should probably try and get them in here and hook them versus having a first interview and a second
well,
interview.
and also just in a timeliness.
Yeah.
We just have a briefer timeline, so.
So we may need, my point being is we may need 2 nights instead of 1 night because we may want to have longer interviews because before our interviews were only like 35 to 40 minutes. We may want to have a slightly longer interview the first go around if we're only going to have 1.
So what I'm hearing is it might make sense to have one meeting in which our goal of the meeting would be to review the resumes that we have and decide who to move forward. And then the second meeting, which might be a 2-night meeting, is what you're saying, is,
Michelle, I get just a point of order.
Yep.
Should I send a copy of that to, I can't think of her name now, just to post?
Janelle,
Yeah, Janelle, so that gets posted.
internal, how will it get sent to internal candidates?
Well, no, I meant just this right now because what I'm actually going to suggest is that everybody opens the email right now and look at the old process.
You mean to Janelle to attach to the agenda in hindsight? Probably, yeah.
yeah, I think that's.
So, because
yeah.
I think that
I think
everyone.
in a minute, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Check in your emails right now, and you should be able to
But if we don't.
see what the process
Yep.
look like, and it'll probably help add a little clarity.
Okay.
And I sent it to.
You sent it to me?
Oh, can I look at yours?
Oh, yeah.
I swear I sent it.
I have the
All right,
job
all right.
description.
Yep, I got it.
Yeah.
You can, I only shut it because the bugs were coming. We don't have some windows.
So,
If you scroll.
Anna,
all the-
David has sent an email with the previous,
And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there's the timeline set up.
okay.
And again, which I just think will help expedite this conversation.
So, Michelle, what you're suggesting is that we just get rid of the semifinalists and go like right to the finalist round. Okay.
Yeah, so if I'm looking at this, this would be, all right, hold on. I need to pull up a calendar. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Michelle and Vinny, are you picking the dates over there? Is that what you're, I don't want to recreate the wheel.
May I ask a logistical question?
Absolutely.
Since we don't, like, it sounds like a lot of people are taking trips and traveling, and since we don't know where these candidates are going to be coming from, is it ridiculous to suggest that we have these meetings by Zoom, since we're allowed to have them by Zoom under state law?
I think my feeling, and I'm open to other people's, but my feeling is it might be best just to pick the dates and not make a statement about that.
Okay.
Does that seem reasonable? That way, all they have to, I mean, people say, I'm available at that time, and we can
Okay.
use technology or not as we see fit.
Could be somebody's in Georgia.
Right, no, it could be, say, in Georgia. Okay, so let's start with the simplest, right? We are today on July 20th. When do we feel that we can post this?
Dorothy, you want
I, David, you sent it to me?
I did, but maybe I said to the wrong, I'll forward it again, I'm sorry.
dpresser@masc.org.
Because you can probably have it done by Friday, right? So then, 3 weeks makes it August the 13th.
That it closes, right?
Yeah. I personally would
Is
say.
there
close it
some-
On the 14th.
Right, Dorothy, is there is that 3 weeks is,
You
Just-
know, I think for 3 weeks is reasonable.
okay?
A lot of time for the permanent job where you're asking them to put together a bigger package, it's only 4 weeks, so I think 3 weeks is reasonable.
Okay, so we would,
Would you close it on a Friday or close it on a Saturday? If it was during the school year,
Yeah.
you'd do it on a Saturday because you wouldn't want it to be like the end of the week.
We usually say by 3 o'clock Friday. That's
What,
the typical.
what about,
deadline.
On the 13th.
well, what about
Why don't you
Monday?
make it at 1 o'clock so it's at 13?
Well,
13?
what about
30.
substantively, the difference for us in evaluating it? I'm assuming we're not going to do anything over the weekend, so it doesn't make a difference to us to have it on a Friday, but it would make a huge difference to candidates to have the weekend. So can I suggest that we maybe close it on the Monday?
or,
Can I just tell you, candidates are going to wait, well, I suppose
They're gonna
suppose
wait
there's
till
some
the last
logic
minute.
behind that. You're going to get all the applications at the last minute. That's the way
So
it
I'm just
works.
saying, if we're not going to really do anything with them till Monday anyway,
Yep.
why not give them till Monday also to do it? Monday, the 16th, right? So we're talking.
Except if you want me to.
but we want to
vet them,
start,
Yeah.
yeah,
want me to vet them, I'll vet them over the weekend.
Yeah.
yeah.
Then you would be
Yeah.
able to get them on Monday. That's when we do searches, that's what
I
happens.
think 1:30 is.
So close it on the 13th and you'll vet them over the weekend and give them to them on Monday?
Yeah, because we're going to have a meeting on Wednesday.
Okay.
We
and
don't want to
s-
make you work over the weekend, though.
Well, we have a meeting already on.
It's part of the job.
Don't we have a meeting on the Thursday, the
We
19th?
do have a meeting on the 19th.
Yeah, but do we have enough time in that meeting to
So,
select candidates?
No.
no, we need to create some other meetings, but it's actually good that we do have a meeting on the 19th, because this is, to David's point, this is going to be time intensive, and it's good, we need to put some meetings on the calendar, and it's good that we have a meeting on the 19th, so that, okay, so I've lost the, so previously, I've lost your document now, hold on, let me pull it up again. Previously, you had like a week between the deadline and then when we selected, is that correct? Is that about? But there's no reason not to have a meeting as soon as possible after
Right.
the deadline, because in the meeting is when we're going to make the decision.
Right,
So we
right.
could have
So
the
you just
meeting
need-
as early as the 16th.
But we have to,
No,
we
we'll
have
be
to
getting
review
the-
them, right?
Yeah, you need
Well,
time.
that's my question, is
Right,
are
so
we
I
reviewing
just-
them in the meeting, or are we reviewing them?
You want to look, you want to
Well,
be able to look at them ahead of the meeting, and sort of everyone.
Okay,
sort
so
of-
when is the earliest possible date that
We
people
already
feel?
have a meeting the 18th.
We have a meeting on the 19th.
If I have 19th circled here too, I
Yeah.
don't know why I said 18.
I always do that.
But we're going to need, in other words, that meeting already has agenda items, so we're going to need,
Do we want
Another
to
meeting.
meet on the
Right.
23rd to come up with our list of finalists?
That's way too long.
I
Well-
was going to say, both David and I have thought this meeting was on the 18th for forever, so we could just do it on the 18th.
well, that was going to be my question, is there a way to put it that week, that then we have,
Need to put it that week. I mean, we're going to get vetted, we're getting 5 resumes.
right, that's,
So,
right.
and it's.
Right.
They're
And
mostly
Dorothy
gonna
is-
Look identical.
Dorothy's going to have give us some guidance, we're going to have some help. So, all right, so what is do we want to say the 18th?
So you're gonna have a full meeting on the 18th and the 19th?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, but the 18th, the entire agenda would be
Yep.
the,
Probably
Search.
don't need to come on the 18th.
You don't need to come on the 18th unless, no.
You are more
The
than welcome.
agenda
but-
is going to be to
Huh?
pick who's coming, and
With-
then to make the questions.
Do that to them.
correct.
Pick the
Yes, to select the candidates that we're going to be putting forward
And the
and,
questions.
and to ask questions, yep.
So people should come to that meeting prepared with questions they believe,
Right.
and Dorothy will provide us.
And Dorothy will help us with that.
We will help.
Okay. And then we need to select the interview date. And how long do we typically want between there?
You need enough time for me to get in touch with people and get them scheduled.
Okay.
So the 18th is what day of the week?
It's a Wednesday.
Wednesday.
I would say go into the next week for the interviews.
Okay.
25th, 26th.
25th or the 26th?
Or the 23rd, 24th.
Yep, any of those days.
The only thing is, because I'm sure Mary Lee is screaming at home, I might be traveling that week,
I am traveling that week.
so.
Yeah.
All right, well. Well, I mean, I think we need to really ask. What about the 23rd?
That's the Monday of
That's
that
the
week.
23rd is
I will not be in town, so, and I will not be in a place that has internet on the 23rd.
So Dorothy, what would be the earliest day that we could have the meeting, and what is the latest day that you, in your experience? So like if we get the candidates on the 18th,
Yeah.
the earliest day we could have the interview would be the 23rd, is that correct?
So if you're going to select them on the 18th, which is a
Wednesday.
Wednesday, it's going to be hard for me to call and say, can you come tomorrow?
Correct.
Right? They're not going to want to interview necessarily, and you guys don't want to sit here on a Friday night or over the weekend. If people aren't there the week of the 23rd, I think it's important that you're not doing it when you have people, when you know people aren't going to be there. I would say move it to the 30th, 31st.
Well, I mean, the thing about, I mean, just to be aware, the first day of school is the first.
I mean,
Everybody's
this
home.
is exactly what I told you, right? Like,
So-
this is hard,
I,
finding these dates is
yeah,
hard.
it is hard.
I prefer the 30th over the 31st.
Me too.
Me too.
The 30th,
Are you gonna do them all in one night?
I would like to.
I,
And then we could set up.
Oh, are you not
I'm
here?
not-
That's
I'm not
okay.
going to be here.
Get back day.
Okay, well, no, but you're,
On the-
you scheduled your vacation.
I had planned all of our vacation for the last 2 weeks of August, figuring that
Yep.
we would be.
Will you be
Not having
back on the 31st, Anna?
Question though, could you then do the Zoom?
Oh, I don't want to do a meeting the night before the first day of school.
The place I'm staying doesn't have internet. Sorry.
How would you feel about shortening the application period so you could get them in the week before everybody goes into?
Yeah,
could
that
do the
sounds-
31st.
That sounds
That was
good.
that was my
31st?
initial question, was how strict are we on the 3
But
weeks?
that's the night before school, the first day of
Yeah.
school.
Is that, no, but if you move it to, you don't need 3 weeks.
Well, that was my question.
Yeah, I would rather move it up.
So if we,
We could get the
if
same
we,
5 candidates if we only posted it for a week.
so if we had the deadline a week earlier,
The 8/6.
on the 6th, that would move our selection meeting to the 11th,
Yeah, I'm going to be in Canada. I'm sorry, I planned,
which I'm supposed to go out to dinner, but I could rearrange that, on the 11th.
But for that,
Which would be
for that,
August
do you have internet
6th.
then?
Pardon me?
we're going to stay in a national park outside Montreal.
I'll have the internet, but it will be after midnight. If you have the meeting at 7 o'clock.
What about the
It'll be
30
like 2 o'clock in the morning.
What was wrong with the 31st? It's just that it's the night before school starts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not just the night before school starts, it's also, I mean, I think, I don't know, but we're pushing ourselves to a point where we're maybe losing people, right? Because is that not true?
I don't think you'd lose.
Okay.
No, I
mean,
personally
You're in a
don't
little bit
care.
different situation than.
Yep, okay.
I personally don't care if you have the selection of whoever the finalists are while I'm not here. I really don't. So if the 11th works, that's fine.
So,
And then we can have the interviews.
does,
on the 18th.
who is available the week of the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th? Who is available that week in person? Jen, you're not available?
I could do every day but Friday.
Okay, so you are available.
Friday, I would not show up anyway.
Right. So you are available that week, except
Yeah.
for Friday. Okay.
That's why I know I won't do it again.
So we would have 2 people missing. How many people would, I'm going to ask it in the reverse, so listen carefully. How many people would be missing if we had it on the 18th, the selection? So everyone.
I'll be here on the 18th.
Oh, okay.
That was, the problem was the.
So the problem is that then we get backed up.
So you
Okay.
needed the interviews to happen on the 18th, 19th.
Yeah, we need the interviews to happen on the 18th and 19th. That's what we have. Are we comfortable with, if we had the meeting either on the 10th, 11th, or 12th, that those people who are not here can Zoom in or phone in? Is it you? Who is it? You? And who
I
else?
think
I'm not comfortable without all of us here.
Okay, but there is a reality here. Like,
I'm 100% comfortable with me not being here.
Okay.
Yes, and if you are having it at 6 o'clock at night, I will not be participating.
Well, Anna, how do you feel?
The club.
You would want to be here.
I'm such a
I would
clubber.
prefer, but I also I think ideally we'd all be here, but I do think there is a reality.
is there a logistical process whereby Anna could communicate with you, Dorothy, and provide you with her insights? Is that something that can happen?
Sure,
Or could I communicate them to you?
yeah.
And then we put them
yeah.
as an exhibit,
I-
maybe?
I could write an email to the body that isn't added until the moment of the meeting or something like that. I don't know. I mean, we can work through that.
No, or it
Send
could
it
be
to
read
me
into
and
the
I-
record.
If that's the case, I think you would send. the
Send
email
it to
Dorothy.
me, and then
Like,
I can
just
give
like
the email to.
She's basically
Yep.
asking,
Yeah.
acting as your proxy.
Yeah,
Yep.
Yep.
My smarter, more elegant proxy, Miss Dorothy Presser. I can provide written feedback.
That would allow us to have the full body here for the interviews.
I'll be here on the 18th and 19th.
That's what I'm saying, is
Oh, yeah,
that you doing
100%.
that and Michelle doing that would allow us
Well-
to have,
I'll be here on the 18th. The 19th is already a meeting, so then are we going to have interviews on the 20th?
No, you
Or
do
we-
them all.
Well,
or we could do them all in one night, or we could
One night.
throw the 17th on there.
Okay, so 3 hours or
Yeah.
4 hours worth of
And I think
interviews.
we did some which was really inconvenient, we did some after a school committee meeting, too,
Yeah.
at 9.
Yeah, but so this isn't the full.
Right.
I think it's safe to say that we can pull 3 names out on the 11th, and then the 18th, we're interviewing 3 people.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
I think so too.
Okay, so
And, yeah.
The
so,
6th that closes, the 11th. It closes?
yep, 6th, we're going to close the posting, so it's a 2-week posting. The 11th, we have a school committee meeting at which we will select the candidates and formulate the questions.
And if I have connectivity from wherever we are, I will Zoom in, but
Right,
I would not count on it.
and that we will have provisions that both Michelle and Anna can either Zoom in, call in, or communicate with Dorothy ahead of time.
Okay.
And then we will set a meeting for the 18th, which is a Wednesday,
For interviews.
for interviews. And that will be the only thing that occurs at that meeting, correct? Interviews?
Would we also select the person?
At the end of the meeting, put an executive session
Yep, okay.
For what purpose?
to,
That has to be an open session. We should probably select the person on the 19th during our regular meeting. And
why
at
did
the
I thought,
end-
then the 19th, we put the
end of the
executive
19th, we
session?
need the
All right,
executive
I
session
just,
to
I
talk
knew
about
we
the
stuck
strategy.
one there
Yeah.
someplace. but that was-
So-
To talk about contract?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I just got,
Yeah, I just forgot where it was.
Yeah.
So on the 18th, we just do interviews. On the 19th, we need an agenda item that says vote or select interim, or offer interim candidate, or I'll work on the wording of them.
appoint, select, nominate, choose.
And then at the end, you're going to have an executive session, so we can talk about
Right, and then,
things.
discuss contract or whatever, or, yeah. Okay. Great.
So we're gonna post it by this Friday.
Correct.
23rd. It's open for 2 weeks, closes on the 6th.
Correct.
Dorothy's gonna vet them over the weekend, give them to everyone on the 9th. You guys are gonna come together on the 11th to pick them,
Correct?
create interview questions, and then you have a
I'm looking
meeting.
for the questions right now. As soon as I find both sets of old questions, I'll.
Right. And,
You're gonna interview them all on the 18th.
Correct.
hopefully.
Right.
Yeah, because
And-
we do 3.
and that, right, and if, I mean, in other words, that's the plan, and if for some reason we truly want to interview 9 people, then we'll need to come up with some other plan. I'm not saying that's going to
No.
happen.
I was like, I would rather
I,
David and I trade hearts and transplant surgery and do that.
well, I wasn't suggesting it, I was just saying,
Goal.
if that were the will of the committee, that's what we would do. So, okay, so,
Like I said, except for like the lofty, someone like just throwing a resume out there, you're really only going to get a
Yep.
few. It's a good list because we're Hamiltonian, but like it's not going to be overwhelming. Like I said, a lot of it's all the same. They all look alike.
okay. Dorothy, what else do you need from us?
Did anyone have the foresight to actually update the timeline on the email I just
No,
sent?
but David, or, Vinny
Yeah,
over
I've got
here
the
is
Awesome,
writing
dates
awesome,
written.
thank you, because I wasn't.
Oh,
was
I
looking
put it in
for-
my own personal
I
calendar.
didn't think about it.
I've got all the dates
Yeah.
Awesome.
written down.
Dorothy, what,
So I'm just looking at the number of bullets you have for the successful candidate, which outstrips the number of bullets we usually have for a permanent candidate.
At that
I know
time,
why
we
that-
needed a lot.
I know why that happened. Well, I know who made that happen.
I would like to get rid of the PhD requirement,
you'd like to get rid of what?
the
didn't hear
PhD
you.
requirement.
Really?
I don't
I
think
think
it's,
there's-
I
they're
don't read
gonna-
it. I don't read it as being there. Advanced degree required,
Doctorate.
a doctorate
Doctorate.
preferred. It says
Preferred.
preferred.
Okay.
Right, so that means, right, they have,
I mean,
right.
you don't need to put in strong communication skills because, duh. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's something we will
Knowledge
determine on,
of and experience in should have that. We actually don't need the working knowledge of the collective bargaining process, because
They're not gonna.
We're gonna hopefully be
Yeah.
done with all three
Yeah.
contracts. Excuse me. Why don't we redline this real quick?
okay, let's,
probably don't need experience with governmental relations with federal, state, and other government agencies.
all right, let's do this. Let's go through
I
it.
like what Vinnie said with experience with regional governments
Regional
preferred.
governments. Right
Okay.
there.
Do we need though, well, I guess because we have many, but with all of the federal funding coming in and all the ESSER funds, like, would it, I'm not
The
sure.
thing I heard Vinny say is he would like help.
Yeah.
Right, I feel like I wouldn't take out things that have a financial
Right.
background.
Right, so we have that here, knowledge of school
Several
finance.
times. You have it, working knowledge.
You have collective bargaining
experience
twice.
with- You have experience with fiscal management, and then you have experience with creating a budget. So-
Okay, so we've got a little bit of repetition in this. So I would like to just start here where it says the successful candidate will have the following qualifications. Let's just go through it. I'm going to read it. If you've got a comment, let's do it like town meeting. You'll say hold, and we'll hold it, okay? All right, so licensed as superintendent of schools in Massachusetts.
It's usually licensed or
Or
ability to.
eligible.
Or eligible. yeah.
Okay, so can someone,
I got it.
thank you, Jen. Okay, advanced degree required, doctorate from accredited institution of higher learning preferred. At least, are we all good?
Mhm.
All right, at least 5 years educational central office or equivalent experience. Shall we say preferred, or do we want to leave it as is?
No, leave that as it is.
Because that equivalent is
Yeah.
pretty, broadens the,
Yep. Experience in a regional district preferred. Strong communication skills with the ability to communicate effectively with school committee members, administrators, classroom professionals, and staff.
that seems like a given.
I think that's not, I mean, Dorothea, we would defer to you if you feel it, but it just seems like fluff.
Okay.
Yep. Knowledge and experience in fiscal management and budgetary controls in an educational setting.
So I'm going to say that one's out, because it's mentioned like 3 other times below here, in a better way.
Okay.
All right, let's delete that one for the moment, and at the end, let's make sure that we have the accurate, that we really do want them to have budgetary experience. Working knowledge of the collective bargaining process and experience administrating collective bargaining
That's not
contract.
needed.
I don't know how,
But I feel like
No,
if we get
Because
it,
we're in the middle of our,
And not only that, if you have a central office or whatever experience, you've been administering the
this is a
contract.
valid point, yes.
So that would be essential, obviously, for the permanent, but, right?
yeah, well,
But
but
not
like,
for the
right now,
interim?
they're,
Principals do
they're not
that,
gonna
and-
be,
But there's no,
Building principals work with collective bargaining agreements, too.
Correct, yeah.
and we're not going to have anything to bargain. Well, maybe one.
Yeah.
well, but if we get grievances or other lesser things that come up, we don't-
Could we just say experience administering collective bargaining contract
need
and get rid of the first sentence?
okay.
Don't need it,
don't need it
it's
for the
assumed.
interim.
Okay.
Really don't.
Okay, are we comfortable redlining that? Okay. Knowledge of school finance and ability to assume responsibility for developing, preparing, and implementing the annual budget.
That's the one I think should stay in.
Yeah.
Yep, that needs to
Wait a
stay.
minute. I don't think that's the one we want.
'Cause
That's the best one
exactly
we've
when
had
they'd
so
be
far.
walking in the door.
And that's, yeah, within 6 weeks.
I like
they
that
have
one
to have a
better
draft.
than the first one.
Yes, yes, agreed. But there's another one later on that you might like even better.
Okay, then that's the only one.
Are we going to hold that one for now?
We're going to keep it.
Okay. Okay. Experience in governmental relations with federal, state, and other government agencies.
Lose that.
No.
Why do we think that's
Yeah,
in there
why-
now? Dorothy, do you have
Because at the
insight into
time-
that?
Because at the time, we were wanting to do something with state funding. They were doing there was all of that stuff about the Student Opportunity Act, and we wanted to be sure that we had someone that was.
I feel like I really don't have a strong feeling either way, but I feel like cutting just for the sake of cutting doesn't really make any sense here. Like, that one's not.
Well,
we're not
but
gonna-
what we're
that's
trying to
not
say
gonna
is
be their
we know
focus.
why we put it in here originally.
Yeah. The reason we originally put it in there is because we wanted someone who was going to advocate for the Student Opportunity Act in the way that they were going to reformulate Chapter 70. That is not happening now.
But do we want something, if not this, something similar because of the COVID money, and we don't know what's happening?
I'm uncomfortable cutting things, not knowing what there's no, I actually don't see the harm in keeping it, but as everyone knows, brevity is not my strong suit, so I'm not bothered by the bullets at all.
This is
but-
someone who's not going to be filling this position even for an entire school year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Where do you want them to be putting their efforts?
That's not going to be where they're going to be.
This is just saying we'd like to have someone with a governmental experience. That's fine. If everyone else wants to cut it, I am not going to die on these hills.
All right, thank you. Anna, are we all comfortable? We're going to redline that one. Okay. Expertise and administrative experience concerning a wide range of issues in education, including curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
Yeah, I think that has to stay with
I
the new
mean,
programs.
yeah,
committee.
although I can't imagine that that wouldn't be always
Why
true.
wouldn't that stay?
Because you're going to, any person applying.
Is going to
and
have
a
that.
license
Is going to have that.
experience.
Well, then why was it put in the first one?
Not necessarily, because Vinny could apply, it doesn't necessarily have that experience.
True.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
I mean, the other
Sorry.
thing
Since
is,
we're doing
people
all of
who are
the
applying
refining
are
of the
going to
curriculum
use
and
these
the-
qualifications to write their personal statement, and I forget if there was a cover letter.
So, when I'm reading this, I think it would, expertise and administrative experience concerning a wide range of issues in education and curriculum and instruction, assessment. I would also put and visioning. Or strategic planning.
Oh, strategic planning, definitely.
Well, there is a later bullet about assessing annual and long-range goals for the total educational system,
Okay.
but that's a later bullet.
Yep. No, that's good.
But I think that one's actually really important.
Okay. All right, did we decide we're leaving that one in?
Sounds like it.
Okay. Experience supervising and conducting evaluations of faculty and supervisory personnel, including principals.
If they have the 5 years of experience in the educational, they have done that.
Right. Okay, but
So you don't need it.
what's, I mean, again, there's no harm in keeping it, right, Dorothy? This is not scaring anyone off.
I guess I would maybe put that on a hold.
Okay,
See how many bullets you have overall.
okay. All right,
Okay.
all right,
This is
holding
the
that one.
collective bargaining one you want to leave in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Knowledge of statutory and legal procedures in regard to collective bargaining and other administrative and judicial proceedings.
Because that's the one that covers.
Managing the year.
It also includes, like, going to mediation.
Right. Excuse me.
Knowledge of financial resources available from state, federal, and private sources. Well, was that your question, Jen, about ESSER funding?
I mean, again, we don't know where the COVID money from the state, I mean, they haven't decided how that's going to be doled out.
I personally would like to see something about state or federal experience built into this, just because it's such a huge issue for the next year. And again, I don't see the harm in keeping these things. And
Can I suggest, if you're keeping in something earlier about fiscal management, that you add it to that bullet instead of having another bullet.
Yep, okay.
10 further down that relates to the same.
Yep.
true. So grouping the
Okay, so
bullets
up above, we have, let's see, Jen, which one did we keep? Knowledge of,
Knowledge of school finance and ability to assume responsibility for developing, preparing, and implementing. So maybe we could put knowledge of school finance, funding sources, and the ability to assume.
Excuse me.
knowledge of school finance,
Comma, maybe state and federal
state
funding
and federal
sources.
funding sources. Okay. All right. And then we would remove this one, the current one, knowledge of financial resources available from state, federal, and private sources, because we're going to attach that. Sensitivity to community needs and demonstrated ability to work with individuals from diverse backgrounds in meeting educational objectives.
I think if we don't
would
keep
keep
that in, we're.
Keep it.
No.
Yeah.
I'd keep it in. I see these bullets as a springboard to like the cover letter. Or it's helping the person identify what our priorities are.
To speak to us.
to
I
speak
also
to
think,
us.
I also think with the DEI goal on the table, I would like to hear people talk about their cultural competency, and I think this is something that would ask them to address that. I would keep it in.
Okay, are we comfortable keeping that? Okay. Demonstrated ability to work with the school committee, staff, and community in developing, carrying out, and assessing annual and long-range goals for the total educational system.
How about, can you just change that with strategic goals?
Instead of long range.
Long range, Sure.
So take out long range and put in strategic.
I mean, for the total education system, and that just ended at strategic goals, right?
Yeah. And so what I'm hearing you say is change the word long-range to strategic planning and period.
Well, I
So-
think then you need annual goals and strategic planning.
And strategic planning.
Period. No, for the total education system.
Okay.
And then get rid of the rest of the statement.
Finally, ability to stimulate parental and student involvement in the decision-making process.
Nah, they only muddy up the waters.
What was that?
It should be caregiver and student involvement.
Oh.
Yeah.
Should be caregiver, and it should actually be de-stimulate.
It-
Oh, yeah.
Wait, it should be caregiver and it should be what?
De-stimulate.
Oh.
De-escalate.
There was another bullet.
Incorporate?
Wait. What was the bullet about visioning?
Hold on.
The goal one that turned,
Yeah.
where it's gonna change into annual and strategic planning.
There wasn't one, Michelle
Earlier.
suggested adding the word visioning,
But we didn't.
but we did
Okay.
not.
Well, you could say carrying out and assessing annual goals, visioning processes, and strategic planning, if you really wanted to on that one.
Wordsmith's fine.
Do you mean vision processes or visioning?
Visioning, the verb, visioning.
Okay. Do we want to keep the final statement in and to change the word parental to caregiver,
Change that one
guardian?
already.
Yes.
Definitely caregiver.
Can we switch stimulate to incorporate or engage?
Engage is fine.
Engage. Ability to engage caregivers and students in the decision-making process?
Do we want to say caregivers, members of the community, and students?
Oh, stakeholders.
Well, you could just say.
Yeah,
Stakeholders?
say, yeah,
Stakeholders.
ability to engage engage stakeholders in the decision-making process.
Of course, that's only taxpayers, so.
No, it's not.
Oh, yes, it is. That's what the community told us.
Okay,
Remember who, but that was definitely said.
Jen, I
They
am
keep
just
their
in awe because when I was a secretary, I could never have been editing on the fly as quickly as you are, so thank you. Can you tell us how many bullet points we have now?
If we leave out the evaluations one, 10.
Dorothy, what's your thought on how many bullet points one ought to have in a posting?
Also, a lot better than 16.
10's a round number, 11 is weird.
Okay, so we're getting rid of the evaluations one
Okay.
then.
Okay.
officially.
I find it hard to believe that we're going to dissuade anyone from doing anything because of a bullet point, but I think it's fine.
No, it's just whether or not you need it.
It's, right, and I think to Julia's point, it does help the person to craft their cover letter, to look at the bullet points and,
Yeah, I mean, I think there were some redundant ones, so it's good
Yeah.
to check it out.
okay, are we,
Get the date, get the timeline, get the dates.
we got the
Yep,
dates.
I'm going to edit the
We-
timeline right
The
now.
application process is not going to be to submit applications electronically via School Spring. It's going to be to submit your information to Dorothy Presser.
Right, but presumably, Dorothy, that, the application process, we would edit that to
Yeah,
say
yeah.
the right thing so that it gets to the right place.
I think with the timeline, the only thing they're missing is the last thing, when they start, but I don't know.
Yeah,
if You want to think about that.
October 1 start. So Jen's updating it with the timeline
Yeah.
we discussed earlier.
And I'm taking out, I'm just saying finalists selected
Yep,
and finalist interviews.
correct.
Okay, so finalists are going to be selected on 8/11.
No.
Let's pick who's coming.
No,
Oh, finalist
The question.
interviews.
selected
No,
on
8/11 is pick who's
8/11.
coming.
Yeah.
She's right.
Interviews are the 18th.
Interviews on the 18th. Okay. And
And then,
Start date.
is our start date October 1st, or do we say something like,
I think you should make it more like the 27th of September.
September
So,
15th?
but we can't.
No, but this person could start then, but they wouldn't start as the superintendent.
I would put October 1st and then figure out the,
Days backwards. Okay.
right? And, yeah, that was, my understanding is that that's kind of, you can say, but that seems like it's a little bit, that's sort of normal, is that then the
Yep.
outgoing superintendent would communicate with the incoming, and they would agree on a few days for shadowing. That seems normal, is that correct?
So when are we, I don't have dates for approving the interim job listing or, other than that.
Doing the job listing, right?
I think we're approving the interim job listing
Okay,
today.
so July 20th.
you don't even need to put it.
Excuse me.
Don't put in dates that are passed.
Okay, so just,
Put in, I would start with the application deadline.
okay.
Right, so the application deadline is the 6th. That's the
So
first
what I
thing.
have for a timeline, August 6th is our deadline for submitting applications. August 11th is when we select the finalists. 18th is the interviews, and October 1st is when he or she
Is the
or they
the decision?
begins.
What about the decision on the
19th is
19th?
decision.
19th is, the yes.
Ah, thank you.
What if we don't come up with a decision? Well, I guess
Well, this is.
We're gonna,
no,
It's all
we're only
subject to
binding
change.
ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
It's all subject to change.
yeah, everything's, that's what life is.
We do many timelines knowing that there may be snowstorms in the
Right.
middle of the timeline that cooks it all up.
There could be a hurricane and no power. We live in Hamilton, Wenham.
So
Not
we,
even a hurricane, just no power.
Or yeah,
So-
just
Right. A tree
breeze.
fell, a breeze, tree fell.
do we need to put the school committee decision and executive session to discuss contract, or is school committee
No,
decision
that'll go
fine?
on our
Yeah.
agenda.
Okay.
Yeah. Right, that's on the 19th, but it doesn't need to be on the, yeah. Okay. As the liaison to Dorothy, I want to make sure that people are comfortable, because Dorothy and I will need to just look at this, make sure they're, not making substantive changes, but if there were, a typo or something that's repeated or something, not that Jen would do that, because but Are we comfortable with that?
I have a question for Anna or whoever might know this. Is our equal opportunity statement up to date?
In terms of the protected classes,
Yes.
that's an issue that I've raised a few times in our handbooks and manuals and policies. The list of groups is variable. So I'd have to go back and look. I mean, it's fairly inclusive, but in terms of policy, our policies are actually all over the map on that, technically. So
I'm sorry, I forgot.
I would be disinclined to change it now because I can't say that we have a uniform statement. My memory is the last time we voted on the handbooks, I explicitly said I'm not going to approve it again until we standardize that, and I don't think that's ever happened, so.
I would, however you post positions now, I would use that word.
Yeah, so if this is-
Vinnie's probably the one to,
Yeah, I was
to
just
know
gonna go
how they're
see if
currently.
it's the same
So
or not.
Vinnie, should I
Statement.
send this to you?
Yeah, sure. That paragraph there.
No, just the whole draft.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Jen, while you're in there, though, I would add the hyphen to Hamilton Wenham Regional School District, and I would remove the space after the slash before affirmative.
Yep.
Because
And
in case you were wondering, the hyphen is the official.
Jen, can you send it to me, too?
I'll send
Yeah.
it. Does everybody want it? I'll just send, I can just send it to everybody.
Yeah, you certainly can send it to everyone.
I'm just reading through this and making
Yeah.
sure. I have to update that, close of business.
Um,
Find job. Search by zip code.
Okay.
You need other things? I'm looking at Dorothy. No?
No, we actually did a lot of
I
work.
think we might have done it.
We did a lot of work tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just looking up the statement.
I guess it helped have the blueprint.
We're just looking up the statement.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, so a little, we're going to just pause because a little bit of work is getting done. People are proofreading things and looking up the question about the equal opportunity statement. We're just confirming. So we're going to pause.
Okay, you're right. That's a lot shorter than this
I'm
one.
just,
so
I'm looking
this
for
one
wrong
says-
dates. That's
Yeah,
all.
and I
It'll get another,
I absolutely, and Dorothy will proofread.
Post on School Spring is much shorter.
Jen, for what it's worth, there's also an errant period after business in the first part of application process.
Hard stop.
Michelle, sorry. that's
And
not
also the
open.
hyphenation is inconsistent across the whole thing.
And does the position go through the 30th of June?
Yes.
Okay, where's the, you said errant,
There's an errant period in the first sentence after application process in the top of page 3. It says by close of business, period, then lowercase on.
Religion, gender, gender identity.
so the applications must be received by close of business.
They're all the same.
Nope, higher, above that, not the
But it
bold.
just doesn't have every
Oh, there's an
After
errant.
that last
taken in
sentence.
order to ensure that each
Ah,
applicant.
I see what you're saying. I already changed that to on August 6, 2021.
But I would also take out the period.
I eliminated the period.
Okay. And then we've missed the hyphen there again.
Okay, Michelle and Vinnie, is there anything over there that we need to know about? Are you just researching?
That-
Michelle, I feel like you asked me a question and I didn't hear it.
The equal opportunity statement just needs to be updated to what we actually are stating on
And
that.
that's what I need to know what it is.
Do you want me to just copy it and email it to you, or?
Yes, please.
Yep.
Where are we having them send these? Because it said School Spring, and I know we don't want to do that.
No, and that part, Dorothy and I will,
You'll add
Dorothy will,
that?
she will edit that to get,
The email and
Right.
everything.
right. Yeah, so I think, and that's part of what you guys, by voting me to work with Dorothy, that, those kinds of things that, you know, if I find an errant comma somewhere, or, you know, that I'll take initiative to remove it. Okay,
Trust you.
thank you. All right, I think if people feel, I feel like we've achieved what we came here to do. I'm looking at everyone in the room, not just the committee members, but everyone. Do we feel like there are other things that need to get
Sorry,
done,
one
or
question.
questions that have to get answered? Anna?
Do we need to change the salary listing to be commensurate with,
No, that salary statement's fine.
all right.
And again, Dorothy, you would alert us if there was something.
Well,
and depending on who you hire, the salary will be different.
Higher or lower?
I
people may
would
have
be
a cap
tempted to put negotiable.
Rather than competitive based on
Yeah,
experience?
because depending on who you hire, if you end up hiring someone who is a retired superintendent, there are restrictions on their earnings. So I would just put negotiable.
Do
for
we have
that.
The
any,
good news is we're going to be going from October to December.
And
That's one
then,
set,
yep.
assuming they didn't work the
Right.
previous part of the year. And then we're going to have the next set.
Then they
so-
have, yep.
do we have to put any sort of NTE based on our actual budget there? Does that matter?
Oh, and calendar year 2021 is wavered.
Governor vetoed that, might go back in.
Yeah, but come on, Democrats totally can get anything through the
I-
House here.
do
Okay,
we-
we digress.
As of
Hold
this
on.
I haven't
moment,
actu-
it is
It's
vetoed.
a budget
All right,
question.
Anna, what's your question?
My question is, for if we put negotiable, do we need to put some sort of NTE because of our actual budget, or are we saying if it ends up being higher than that?
No,
Okay.
good.
All right, so we're going to change that to negotiable. Okay.
So what I have, the equal opportunity statement now says the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District is an equal opportunity / affirmative action employer. Hamilton Wenham Regional School District does not discriminate in its programs, activities, or employment practices based on race, color, national origin, age, religion, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. And then I have the,
But we don't put that statement in any other place. That's that last statement. That's not in our postings.
You just put
That-
equal opportunity employer.
Yeah, we don't say something about every opportunity will be made to make decisions based on merit.
okay, so you want,
So in
you
a,
just,
in the posting, a typical posting would just say equal opportunity employer, and that's the standard.
With what she just read.
and then would we have the statement in admission to access to employment and treatment
So
programs and activities?
I'm trying to get clarity here because Jen is reading something that was previously on what we had listed, but Dorothy is saying that the
It's your
standard,
decision if you want to make it more, but generally, when we post positions, it's just equal opportunity employer. If you want to have the longer statement, totally up to you.
It was originally a longer statement. I just took
Yeah,
what
no,
Vinnie sent me
right.
and subject,
The updated language.
put the updated.
no, I
language.
understand. Jen is saying that it was previously, and I don't know if this is actually the way it was actually posted. This is the document that was created by the school committee. I don't know if it was actually, but it does have the paragraph that you're just
Vinnie,
updating.
you just sent Jen what we post typically for,
Today.
so I think we should just do what we typically do. Regardless of this statement or
Yes.
something shortened, let's just be consistent on towards.
So Vinnie, when we typically
agree.
post for any position, you sent the statement that we typically, that sounds,
Okay, so I'll get rid of the, in admission to access to employment
Right.
and the last
right.
sentence,
So we're just standardizing for our district what we typically do.
period. Okay.
Perfect.
And then we had said we were changing the salary to
Negotiable.
Negotiable.
just negotiable, period?
Yep.
Okay.
Or maybe not even a period.
Negotiable.
Question mark?
Ellipse.
Jen, I
I
wouldn't,
like the ellipse.
Jen, I would not put a period because it's not really a sentence.
No, I meant period like end of statement, not period as in like, and I, yeah.
Yeah, she,
You could put a comma, still speaking about it.
I've been debating Oxford commas the whole time I've been doing this.
The answer is yes.
Yes.
Oh, because it didn't have any, so I
Yes
will
to
go.
Oxford commas. Do we have to vote on that?
no.
Yes.
Okay.
Plus, it's an excellent.
I feel like we have achieved our goals, and I'm waiting for anyone who feels like there's something additional that
I
we
make
need
a
to do or
motion to
discuss.
adjourn.
Wait, hold on, wait. Dorothy,
I think you're done.
anyone else? All right, Michelle?
I make a motion to adjourn at 9:49.
A second.
Seconded by Julia, and we are adjourned at
I
9:49.
think we have to vote. We have to
Oh,
vote.
sorry. All in favor,
All the pleasure.
and it's unanimous. All right, and we are adjourned.